You are listening to Supreme Magus by Legion 20, Chapter 4326, The Invincible King, Part 2. Moreover, no ruler managed to unify Giera like Teneb. A long period of wars and unrest followed the death of the Invincible King, with every freed region blaming its neighbors for the loss of their resources. Peace never lasted long, and the attempt to merge the countries that had formed the rebel alliance lasted even less. Tista said. "Okay, but what does this tell us about this place?" Tista asked. "Old fake magic runes, the kind you need to carve and cover with mana crystal powder," Quilla replied. "Back then, magic was primitive, and Tiers 4 and 5 were exclusive to Awakened. Yet Sola said she saw an army of constructs, which means the Invincible King knew Forgemastery, Warden magic, and maybe even alchemy. Nothing of this is recorded in my history books. I can't help but wonder why, if the Invincible King was such a powerful Awakened, he didn't use these same safeguards to protect his capital." "I can answer that," Menadian replied. "Those kinds of old runes were impossible to hide and easy to disable. One scratch and the whole array crumbled. Here, the Invincible King could hide them behind rocks, paint, and moss, but in a palace. Unless Teneb did the cleaning himself, the house staff was bound to find the runes. As for the golems, they are dumb. If he gave the command, attack anyone who isn't me, the Invincible King would have no one to serve him in the blink of an eye. Leaving the golems in the open required not only a very complex order that traitors could have exploited, but would have also allowed his enemies to study and replicate his creations. As you pointed out, Quilla, Teneb was a powerful Awakened. Maybe he even reached the Violet Core. He probably assumed that no human could harm him and used his skill to protect his treasures after hiding them away. I bet this place is one of his secret stashes." "One," Lith echoed. "Do you think there's more?" "The only basket worth putting all your eggs into is an Omni pocket," Menadian nodded. "Otherwise, leaving all your treasures in one place is no different than begging to be robbed." Space. A few kilometers ahead, deep into the hidden keeps of the Invincible King's Arsenal No. 7. "I can't believe that piece of shit of Zarkar Teneb was one of the Black Throne's disciples," Uriger, the Book of Knowledge, said. "Invincible King, my dusty pages. He never lost a battle because the Black Throne guided and supported him from the shadows." "And why do you care?" Salanoth, the Ring of Space, leaned against the wall while waiting for the cursed book to crack the umpteenth magical lock that barred their way. "Because I'm one of his victims," Uriger snarled. "Teneb and the throne defeated me, humiliated me. They stole everything I had accumulated in the treasuries of the kingdom I had built and ransacked my magical library. It took me centuries to overcome the shame of being bested by a mere bright violet core meat sack. I wasted years looking for the perfect host to enact my revenge, and it was all for nothing. I didn't lose to Teneb. I lost to the Black Throne." "I can't believe you whine so much about something that happened over 6,000 years ago," Jorel snorted. "Consider this an opportunity to get back at Teneb and shut up." "I would agree with you if this weren't the 27th place the Black Throne pointed us at, and only fucking 5 of them were left untouched," Uriger replied. "Also, even if we recover what was stolen from me, I'll have to share it with parasites like you." "Strong words for someone who didn't even know this place existed," Acton the Bastard scoffed. "Without Jorel, you'd get nothing at all." "Also, how would you carry our alleged prize out of here?" Salanoth waved her hands at the massive double doors. "Your Omni pocket is already full, and so are all the dimensional amulets of our beloved comrades. You need me." "We need you," Jorel corrected her. "You are the only dimensional mage among us. I'm counting on you to warp everything to the Black Throne in case we hit the mother lode and even your Omni pocket isn't enough." "Please, I'm the Ring of Space." She gave the Storm Griffin a mocking bow. "I was born for, well, a completely different reason, but this much is nothing to me." "And I'm the Book of Knowledge," Uriger interjected. "Without me, you would never know how to disable such ancient magical formations without triggering the self-collapse mechanism of this place. Remember that this stuff is old, but far from weak. I need to focus, or I'll make a mistake and trigger one of the many dummy nodes of the arrays. Teneb knew how resourceful the Black Throne is, and put every ounce of his considerable skill into building this place. Use mind links if you want a yap. I need silence for my work." "Space. I'm now certain of this," Sola said after they got close enough to Armory 7 for the eyes of Menadian to spot the underground fortress in the distance. "There's no need to be on guard. Everything out here was just a delay tactic. Something meant to stall the invaders while Teneb rushed here with his constructs. None of this was meant to survive him, we can warp ahead. How can you be so sure? Quilla asked. Think about it, Quilla. The Odi civilization is much older than this, and they had golems capable of opening warp steps. Even if Teneb wasn't that good, he could have carved the runes for permanent gates, yet he didn't. It would have allowed him to send his maintenance golems all across the maze to repair traps and recharge the arrays. Instead, he left everything outside the fortress to rot and used common blades for the spike pits. This means that he never relied on the traps, and their only purpose was to scare the invaders and waste their time. Couldn't he just be afraid of wasting his resources and opening the way to the enemy invasion? Lith's paranoia ran at full gear. As you said, golems are dumb. You scratch a rune, wait for the maintenance golem, and knock it out. Rinse and repeat until no maintenance golems are left, or you jump through the warp gate and get past the fortress defenses. Golems are indeed dumb, but why not surround the gate with combat golems? Solus replied. They would cover for the maintenance golems and shoot down the enemy from a safe distance once the alarm is triggered. As for your second objection, would you jump past an unknown gate and inside an enemy stronghold with no idea what's waiting for you beyond? No, that would be stupid. Lith shook his head. My point exactly, Solus said. It's a move as stupid as wasting so many crystals for arrays that would be used once at best, unless Teneb repaired them himself when he was alive and assumed they would become useless after his death. Solus is right, Menadian said. I've met people like Teneb while traveling around Magur with Lakra, and I know his type. The invincible king had a powerful enemy he hated and built this place to keep his treasures safe from them. Chapter 4327 Siege Fortress, Part 1. To scare Teneb so much, his enemy must have been at least another violet core awakened, and this junk wouldn't hurt a blue core. People like the invincible king play their cards close to the vest and focus their resources on single, devastating blows. After an in-depth scan of the eyes, Tista's mouth, and all mystical senses found nothing, the group switched from walking to flying. Lith kept full guard active and Ragnarok at hand at all times to be safe, but nothing happened. Seriously, can it really be this easy? He avoided saying it out loud not to jinx his alleged stroke of luck. They reached the outer wall of the armory in minutes, and there they had to stop. There was no visible door, only a massive stone slab going from the ground to the ceiling. There was no trace of magic metals or crystals, and no dust or signs of wear either. Unlike the rest of the maze, the wall was as clean and smooth as if it had been laid there the day before. Life vision confirmed that the stone slab was heavily enchanted, while the eyes revealed countless runes and crystals on the other side. Does it say anywhere in your books how to open this, dear? Morok asked. No, what about the eyes, Solus? She said. The good news is that the cloaking runes are so old that I can crack them in my sleep, Solus replied. The bad news is that there isn't a single empty centimeter on either side of the entrance. The arrays overlap so perfectly that it's hard to understand where one begins and the others end. I don't recommend using origin flames or warping. There is a battalion of battle-ready golems right past the gates, and 3 more on standby. How long will it take to disable the arrays? Lith asked. This many, it would take me days and at the cost of the headache of a lifetime, Solus replied, opening the door instead. She placed her hand against the wall, sending several pulses of mana in a specific sequence and rhythm. Once Solus was done, she stepped away, and an invisible hand seemed to carve the outline of a door. The fissure in the stone became wider and deeper until a passage opened before her, leading through what turned out to be a 5 meters, 17, thick stone wall, followed by 5 more meters of pure orichalcum studded with violet crystals as far as the eye could see. Wow, this is amazing, Quilla said. And too easy. Lith used his keen Tiamat eyesight to study the inside of the fortress. If the arrays are so complex and intertwined, how did you activate the opening mechanism so quickly without triggering any alarm? The layout of the arrays is indeed complex, and finding the right runes from the right magical formations that form the lock combination and open the door would have taken me hours. Solus replied. That's why instead of focusing on studying the arrays, I looked for the lock. Once I found it, I simply injected mana in the nodes of the opening enchantment, and voila! There was no need to untangle the mess when I could just pull the strings at the end. Again, it's too easy, even for an ancient fortress enchanted with outdated magic. Lith pondered. Why is there no mechanical trap that has to be disarmed before or after opening the door? The whole path that led here was chock full of them, and programming the golems to perform regular maintenance would have taken little effort and risk. Also, how can someone brilliant enough to build such an elaborate labyrinth do such a poor job for the most important safeguard of their fortress? When something is too weird to make sense, it usually means you're missing something. This could be a trap. No, this is a trap, Menadian said, checking the eyes readings and taking a closer look at the layout of arrays inside the armory. This is a trick ancient forgemasters used to make up for the constraints of the magic of their time and the lack of decent cloaking runes. They split the array circuit for the door into two sides. The one outside is easier to open because it's connected but not integrated in the rest of the magical formations. The one on the inside, instead, is both connected and integrated. Once you enter, you can't open the door again without knowing the proper sequence of runes necessary to activate the proper sequence of arrays. It's brilliant in its simplicity. You let your enemies in, but from that moment on, one mistake and they are at your mercy. Since the intruders didn't need to deactivate the rest of the arrays, all the safety measures and alarms are still in place. They just need to touch the wrong thing or move in the wrong direction to find themselves trapped and under the fire of the arrays from every side. Silverwing and I stumbled into a place like this back when I was young. We were stupid and arrogant enough to think ourselves smarter than a bunch of dead awakened that relied on primitive magic. We left someone outside to open the door for us, believing that if things went south, we could still escape. We were wrong. The safety arrays deactivated the external lock and trapped us inside. The magical formations were old junk, and the safety protocols predictable, yet we barely got out of there alive. It was like having been thrown in the middle of a battlefield where the enemy was weak, but had spent their entire life preparing for that fight, while we stood there like idiots, wondering what had gone wrong. I assumed that something like this might have happened. You did. Everyone turned to look at Lith in disbelief. So before leaving the mansion, I forgemastered a spirit home stone. He ignored them and took what looked like a black pool ball covered in red and emerald runes out of his pocket dimension. Dimensional magic is easily blocked, whereas spirit magic takes a lot more effort. I'll leave the home stone outside and at a safe distance from the closest array. If something goes wrong, we'll have an escape route ready at a moment's notice. Yet this also complicates things. Lith took everything he might need out of his dimensional pocket and invited the others to do the same. Spirit objects only answer to their maker, so only Solus and I can activate the spirit home stone. Stray too much from either of us, and you might not reach the dimensional passage in time. We are no dimensional mages, but I'd like to spend a few minutes studying this place, Quilla said. If we can memorize the dimensional coordinates of even a single corner of this cave, we'll have one more contingency plan. That's a big if. Nalrund conjured a sphere of light to examine his surroundings carefully and find a corner of the cave that was remotely memorable. Everything looks the same to me, just rocks surrounded by more rocks. Then let's make something out of nothing. Morak walked away from the door and to a distant, plain wall. Chapter 4328 Siege Fortress, Part 2. After making sure with all the means at his and his companions' disposal that there was nothing magical or mechanical he might disturb, he activated the orange eye on his right shoulder. The rock wall became soft, and multiple lines appeared on its surface, as if dozens of invisible fingers were drawing in perfect harmony. When Morak was done, the lines formed the stylized form of a woman holding two winged babies. There, if I can't remember where I left a picture of my wife and children, then nothing else is going to work, he said, staring at his work with pride. There were too few details to identify the subjects of the mural, but the softness of the lines expressed all the love and affection that the artist felt for them. This is incredibly romantic, Quilla squealed, holding the tyrant's arm. Yeah, but it's not for everyone. I suck at drawing and I have no mystical eye to help me, Nalrund sighed. Any attempt to draw Freya would look nothing like the original. You could always draw her boobs, Morak shrugged. It's not that difficult, and I bet they are hard to forget. Very funny, smartass. Nalrund snarled as he tried and failed to carve in the rock something that held any significance to him. Morak must never know, he actually thought. I love my kids, but I'm no artist. Ryman raised his hands in surrender. I'll count on my speed to rush on your side in case anything happens, Lith. What about you girls? Too complicated, Tista said. I'll just use spirit blinks to reach Lith. I'll use this mural as my dimensional beacon as well, Quilla said while admiring Morak's work. You love yourself that much. That's unhealthy, dear, he said. No, you oaf, she snorted. I love the thought my husband put into his art piece. Thanks, then, he gave her a polite nod. Once everyone was ready, Solus opened up the door again, and everyone crossed over. The corridor was large enough for 4 adult humans to walk abreast, but Lith ordered everyone to move in pairs so that only he and Solus would be forced to rush forward if the passage closed suddenly. Protector and Morok were fast enough to rush out, while Quilla and Tista had a clear line of sight to blink to safety. Nothing happened, and everyone reached the other side before the door closed shut by itself. Well, this is as creepy as it's impressive, Morok said while using his multiple eyes to look around without turning his head. If I didn't know better, I'd expect that lots of people live here. Tall, bulky golems with a chest wider than a barrel and elemental crystals, the size of a coconut, stood along the entire length of the defensive wall. They were deactivated, and their eyes were empty, but the mana crystals and runes on their surface emitted enough light to display their dormant power. Tall and spindly golems walked across the fortress with purpose, extending their limbs for several meters whenever they detected a rune that needed maintenance or an almost depleted mana crystal. Each of their fingers carried a scalpel-shaped white gemstone that they used to repair a damaged rune or slightly shift its position if they had gone out of alignment with the rest of the array for whatever reason. The maintenance golems carried large metal baskets filled with mana crystals of different sizes on their backs. Most gemstones were filled with energy, some were recharging themselves, and a few were almost depleted. Yet the maintenance and soldier golems were exactly what Morok would expect to find in such a fortress, and not the reason for his comment. The entire armory was as bright as day thanks to small holes in the ceiling and a system of mirrors and crystals that spread the natural light. The courtyard was filled with flower beds, bushes, and orchards. Constructs shaped like small, stumpy chariots tilled the fertile ground, while humanoid golems trimmed the branches, watered the fruit trees, and killed the parasites infesting them with magic. In the distance, far on the east side of the armory, Lith could see a pond with fish jumping above the surface. The air was fresh, and if not for the winter, the stronghold would have been filled with colorful flowers and ripe fruits. This isn't an enchanted metal deposit, Menadian said, furrowing her brow. This is an underground fortress built to withstand a prolonged siege. The invincible king was as brilliant as he was afraid of his mysterious enemy. Look at that. Small, bird-shaped flying golems circled the courtyard and had locked their mystical senses on the newcomers. More constructs of smaller build compared to the soldiers, but of identical design to each other, strolled the city for no apparent purpose. Units of even smaller constructs the size of a basketball and shaped like spiders skittered along the outer walls and accompanied all the other golems as they moved across the underground city. The human-sized constructs seemed to move independently, but if you pay attention, you notice that they never stray too far from each other and form a 6-man unit, Menadian pointed out. Moreover, unlike the big constructs, they have been embossed with elemental crystals of different types. Those are array golems. The spiders, instead, are fixer-type golems. They repair damaged constructs during battle when there is no time to wait for them to self-repair, or they suffer critical damage. You were right, Rifa. This is a trap. Lith looked around, realizing that they had already been surrounded. The scouts track our numbers and position, the array golems form a perimeter around us, and the fixers stand ready to step in. We are against a specialized army that is probably studying us and formulating strategies as we speak. An inactive trap, though, Rifa said. As long as we are careful, we have nothing to worry about. Where is the adamant storage, Solus? That way, she pointed at the keep of the underground fortress. Is it me, or are the golems paying more attention to me than to the rest of you? I know we are all under surveillance, but no matter where I turn, I always find at least 3 constructs focusing on me, and only one staring at each of you. You are right, Morok said, after a quick mind link allowed the evolved humans to share their multiple fields of view. The golems seem to be particularly wary of you. Even the array golems form a circle centered on you. Can it be because you are the one who opened the door? Maybe, Solus shrugged. Let's do what we have to and get out of here. Agreed, Lith nodded. Too bad the wall is made of orichalcum, or I'd just warp a large section of it on our way out and be done with this place. He shapeshifted into his Tiamat form and unfurled his wings, ready to react with multiple limbs and extreme prejudice if the scout golems assessed him and his friends as a threat after completing their scans. Protector and Nalrond followed suit, switching to their hybrid form to keep themselves humanoid and not hinder their companions with their size. Chapter 43:29 Cursed Carrion, Part 1. Tista and Morok went full Hecate and Tyrant, slowly absorbing the world energy through their wings. I guess Lith's paranoia must have rubbed off on me. Solus sighed in relief when they walked through the entrance of the keep, and nothing happened. Whoever Teneb's mysterious enemy was, we can cross Emperor and Divine Beasts off the list. Yet do me a favor and keep your weapons sheathed. There's no telling what might trigger the intruder alert. When she turned around to look at her companions, Solus noticed that most of them now exceeded the 2 meters, 67, of height, making her, Quilla, and Menadian look like small children in a group of adults. Gods, if I hate it when you do this, Quilla sighed. You make me feel like back at the academy when I was a malnourished little girl. Who cares about that? Menadian shrugged. Someone is tall, someone is average, and someone is a sexy midget. Am I right, Solus? Yes, I mean no, she grunted. Speak for yourself, Mom. She's right, Riffa. Solus is too fat to be sexy. Morok nodded, making Quilla giggle, and Solus' eyes almost pop out in outrage. I meant that I forgot that now I can shapeshift as well, you jerk. Solus focused on her life force as a whole rather than just the human threads, and shapeshifted into her divine beast form. As for you, Quilla, how can you laugh when your husband calls another woman sexy? He didn't, Quilla shrugged. Riffa called herself and you sexy, you denied her claim, and Morok jumped at the occasion to tease you a bit. As simple as that. Simple, my Solus, words died in her throat, as the lights of the armory turned red and alarms blared with deafening noise. The sensory arrays of the underground fortress had perceived the anomaly that Solus was ever since she had stepped inside the armory. Yet until that moment, her tower side had remained hidden under her human life force and shielded by her cloaking rings. That and the many differences between the modern enchantments of Menadian's tower and the Black Throne's ancient ones had confused the scout golems enough not to sound the alarm. Yet the scouts had never stopped looking for a sign of the enemy they had been created to fight. Shapeshifting had brought Solus' tower side to the surface, and the defensive system's reaction was instantaneous. All the dormant golems scattered throughout the armory stirred, and the many arrays that enveloped the cave became active, their runes now visible to the naked eye. Space, a few hundred meters underground, in front of the final vault protecting the adamant reserves stored inside Armory Number 7. What in the gods' names did you idiots do? Uriger snarled as a force field suddenly erupted from the armored door, cutting his enchanted tools in half and almost severing his host's arms at the elbow. I told you to sit tight and touch nothing. I didn't even pick my nose, Acton snarled. Nobody has moved a muscle since we got down here. You are the one who messed up, old fool. I did no such thing. The Book of Knowledge gestured for his companions to get away from the vault, just in time to avoid a massive heat ray that turned the wall behind them into a molten crater. Have you already forgotten what I told you earlier? If I had triggered the alarm of the safe, the defensive system would have detonated the whole room and buried us under tons of rubble. Since that didn't happen, one of you dumb flesh bags must have activated another failsafe. Believe me, I don't like defending these ignorant runts, but I can assure you they didn't do more than pace around, eat, and drink, Salanoth said, which leaves only one conclusion. We are not alone anymore. Someone else must have triggered an alarm, Jorl said as the heavy stomping announced the arrival of a battalion of soldier golems. Get ready to fight, cast your best spells, and signal when you are done. No matter how old those constructs are, dealing with so many of them will be a nightmare without Frost's soul. But once we activate it, we won't be able to cast new spells or rely on our equipment. Acton completed the phrase for the Storm Griffin. I'm ready. Same. Jorl shapeshifted into his upper form, his lion fur turning into a black hide and his beak's edge becoming jagged. I was crafted Uriger's host doubled over in pain as the cursed book collapsed to the floor in a seizure. Something's wrong. The eyes of Salanoth's host rolled back into her skull. I can't. The cursed ring's host collapsed as if she had just had a stroke, and her upper features reverted to a human. Are they dead? A Titania asked. Since when can living legacies die? Aren't they supposed to be immortal as long as their vessel is intact? The humans are alive. Jorl kneeled, putting his fingers at the host's throats and finding an irregular, frenzied pulse. The problem is the cursed artifacts. According to my breathing technique, they are suffering from a major case of mana poisoning. That makes no sense. Acton turned towards the entrance and noticed the elongated shadows of the constructs approaching in lockstep. Cursed or not, Enchanted items feed on world energy. World energy can't poison anyone, or every form of life on Magur would be long since dead. The Bastetupper was right, yet he underestimated how thorough the invincible king had been in his preparations to fight the Black Throne. A mage tower was just an incredibly powerful artifact of colossal size. Teneb knew that to fuel his most powerful abilities, the Black Throne needed vast amounts of world energy that he would conjure via a temporary geyser before attacking the armory. It was the reason the immortal king had looked for a way to poison the well from which the Black Throne was bound to draw unsuspectingly, and one that would only affect a cursed object, leaving Teneb and his army of constructs free to fight to their full strength. Salanoth and Uriger were no mage towers, but their nature as cursed objects was more than enough for the cursed carrion array to infect their pseudo-cores and the world energy stored in their mana crystals. Incoming, a Sphinx Supper yelled as the first line of soldier golems appeared from around the corner. The large, stumpy legs of the constructs disappeared, turning them into square blocks with 2 frontal magic cannons. The second line of soldiers elongated their legs to step on the sitting golems before making their legs disappear as well. The third line of constructs did the same, blocking the only corridor leading out of the vault with a solid wall comprised of soldier golems ready to unleash a volley of hypercompressed elemental energy. Do not falter, Jorl infused himself and his remaining allies with a bolt of life maelstrom. Frost Soul now. Unfortunately for the uppers, the already active arrays of the armory recognized the threat posed by the corrupted water element and sealed it within a thin stasis field. The firewall formation finished charging up its crystal cannons and released a barrage of high-density fire element. Chapter 40, 330 Cursed Carrion, Part 2. Jorl took the brunt of the damage, shielding the other uppers with the new equipment that the Black Throne had crafted for him after enhancing its power cores with a bolt of silver lightning. The Storm Griffin had the mass and strength advantage, but each blast hit like a truck and was as hot as magma. When the construct's crystals ran out of world energy, Jorl had suffered major burns, and the air in the vault was barely breathable. Charge, we need to break past the blockade before he coughed, yet that wasn't the reason he stopped talking. The golems of the firewall formation had already received fresh crystals and finished charging up their mana cannons. Jorl was about to warn his companions when the golems fired again. Space. At the keep's entrance at the same time. Something is wrong with my body. Solus felt as if acid flowed through her veins, making her nauseous and dizzy. Whatever it is, it's getting worse by the second. I'm getting worse. Ragnarök, are you okay? Lith used his breathing technique on himself and the angry blade, but found nothing wrong. I'm fine. Ragnarök clicked its straps as if it were sniffing the air. Staff. Me fine, it replied. World energy weird, though tastes weird. Since when? Lith asked. Since light turned red. The fusion reactor Effie. Menadian rushed to her daughter's side. Use the fusion reactor to supply your tower side, and only that with untainted world energy. Solus was in too much pain to listen to Menadian, her eyes rolling back and her mouth foaming. She was no cursed object, but her bond with a mage tower made her the closest thing to the cursed carrion array's true target. Lith. On it. The Tiamat placed his hand over the crystal on Solus' palm and ordered the tower to tap into the reactor's reserves. Solus regained her senses with a deep gasp, coughing up the poisoned energy of the cursed carrion array that flowed in the living aspects of her life force. The golems are coming, all of them. Nalrund pointed at the battle formation of approaching soldiers, arrays, maintenance, and fixers. Dimensional magic is sealed. Quilla tried and failed to open a warp to Morok's mural. The space is compressed tighter than Lith's coin purse. Morok tried and failed to open a spirit steps to the same destination. Lith was right. Teneb's enemy was a powerful awakened, and the invincible king sealed all the ways out. The only silver lining is that our equipment is unaffected by whatever knocked Solus out cold, Tista said. Yet that's not going to help us much if we let the golems surround us. You guys think of a way to get us out of here. I'm going to buy you some time. She rushed out of the door, growing to her full size. The Hecate reached a height of 30 meters, 100, and swung her battle claws, Firefang. The air pressure generated by the mere motion stopped the advance of the soldiers, sending the fixer and maintenance golems tumbling across the armory streets. The flaming air blades that followed in the shockwave's wake hit much harder. They cut the soldier golems asunder and melted their stone bodies at the edges. The self-repair enchantments now had to restore the deformed stone to its previous shape before the golems could be put together. All of this with a single swing of my arms and a fraction of the origin flame stored inside Firefang. Tista smirked in triumph. Unfortunately for her, the flaming air blades stopped upon encountering the second line of soldier golems. They wielded large adamant shields the size of a table instead of mana cannons, and generated a spirit barrier from their pseudo-cores. Before the air blades reached them, the shield golems locked shoulders together, linking their enchantments as well. The energy fields channeled by the adamant shields overlapped to perfection, forming a dome-shaped spirit barrier large enough to protect the rest of the strike force. Under the cover of the shield golems, the fixers attached themselves to both ends of the fallen constructs, conjuring repair enchantments that restored the soldier golems as quickly as if a skilled forgemaster were working on them. At the same time, the maintenance golems plunged their crystal fingers into the shield golems to replenish the world energy they had just consumed. This is nothing like Kula. Morak conjured a mind link not to waste time talking. While the Odi used their perverse human experiments to create jack-of-all-trades golems that could adapt to every situation, Teneb took the opposite route. His golems are highly specialized and can perform a single task, but he created so many different kinds of constructs that their teamwork makes them as good as a real army. The tyrant was still thinking when the spirit barrier came down. The third line of soldier golems spread out, allowing the fourth line to step forward. They fired highly condensed blasts of water and air magic near the intruders instead of at them. The ice and the wind golems aimed at the same spot, so that their spells exploded into a hailstorm upon impact. The temperature in the cave dropped several degrees with each shot, and the small-scale tornado grew more violent with each explosion. Fuck me sideways, Teneb deserved his title as the Invincible King. Lith inwardly cursed. The scout golems have already identified our weakness to cold typical of dragons, and by not attacking any of us directly, they make our spirit barriers useless. I noticed. Nalrun conjured a dome-shaped construct that cleared the air from the frozen mist and released heat weaves from his claws that dispelled the cold. Still, those golems are outdated one-trick ponies. If we disrupt their teamwork, they'll be nothing more than annoying, giant toys. He released a heat ray the size of a pillar that he used to sweep across the open courtyard. Conjuring hard light constructs would have been a waste of mana, since the golems would have shot them down long before they could reach their target. The heat ray, instead, moved fast and hit hard, forcing the golems to either dodge and break ranks or to tank them and get pushed out of their clockwork formation by the violent stream of raw energy. At the same time, the Hecate struck the golems from above with Firefang, her wings, and tail. Each blow dealt little damage, but many units of golems were sent flying. After a few targeted strikes, the ordered battalion of constructs scrambled to assume a semblance of order. Excellent move, sis, Lith said. Don't waste your origin flames on them, they would just. The array golems completed their light sealing array, and Nalron's spells disappeared into thin air. The air turned instantly cold again, sapping the divine beast's strength and disrupting Tista's attack tempo. The scattered soldier golems used the short respite to run into each other, the single units becoming the building blocks of something bigger, something that could face even a cursed mage tower while looking it in the eyes. A light sealing array and now even a combiner. Lith stared at the colossal golem in confusion. How much did Teneb spend to build this place, and why did he leave no record of his enemy's identity? Chapter 40, 331 Greatest Gift, Part 1. What was Teneb hiding here, and who was he hiding from? Lith had no idea that the invincible king's nemesis was the same man who had given him the means to build his empire. The armory was one of the fortresses from which Teneb had planned to either stage the reconquest of his empire, in case he was ever forced into exile or turn into the graveyard of his despised mentor, the Black Throne, whatever came first. Space. In front of the vault at the same time. Jorl had already healed from his wounds, yet not even invigoration could alleviate the stabbing pain in his chest. The moment the oxygen in the room runs out, all the magic in the world won't save us. We need to get out of here. The storm griffin switched from frost to thunder soul and charged forward like the cornered beast he was. He took a deep breath to take in as much air as he could, using darkness fusion to resist the burning pain in his lungs. He dodged half of the second salvo of elemental blasts coming from the firewall formation, a few shots of the third, and took the fourth in full. By the time he reached the golem's blockade, his Starpath armor was broken in multiple points, and what still covered him was as hot as molten metal. Jorl roared in anger as he struck with all of his strength, knowing that the stink of charred meat and burnt feathers he smelled was his own. He released a second bolt of life maelstrom and activated his bloodline ability, Focus Point. The storm griffin put the entire weight of his body, the silver lightning, and the thunder soul on the tip of his maces, Dusk Wraith. The firewall formation crumbled like a sandcastle at high tide. The shockwave of the impact so powerful that the backline of soldier and maintenance golems was sent crashing against the walls, ceiling, and each other like pinballs. A cold breeze hit Jorl's face like a spring rain after a draft, and he gasped avidly, feeling strength return to his limbs. "Grab those cursed buffoons and follow me. We are not going to die, not today and most certainly not here." The uppers nodded and followed their leader. Acton stopped using Mana Body to prepare a new set of spells and activate his breathing technique to heal his wounds as they ran. "You saved my life, Acton, I won't forget that," Jorl said. "And you mine, we're even, brother." The bastard had covered the storm griffin with mana aura and breathed controlled bursts of origin flames to weaken the golem's volleys in Jorl's path. "Yet I have to ask, are you sure this isn't a death trap? That the Black Throne isn't trying to kill you with a borrowed knife?" "To what end?" Jorl took point and charged through the golem's files like a mad bull. "There's nothing but adamant here, and he cares nothing about it. If the Black Throne wanted to kill me for his sick pleasure, he'd do it in a place where he could enjoy the show from a front-row seat. We are just paying the price for his and our arrogance. The throne underestimated the invincible king's wile, and we didn't bother putting ourselves in his shoes before breaking into his house. Otherwise, we would have realized that no adamant deposit requires this much security and so many golems. This is Teneb's plan to kill the Black Throne." He pointed at the fallen cursed objects. "Screw the adamant. If we learn the method the invincible king devised to inflict mana poisoning on a living legacy, all the magic metal we already collected is nothing. The Black Throne has given us the greatest gift we could wish for. A weapon that can weaken and maybe even kill him. Even better, we could flip the table and make him our servant. Why get rid of a mage tower when we can safely use it to build and protect our kingdoms, brother?" Acthon's eyes went wide in understanding, and his feline snout curled up in a cruel smile at the idea of turning their self-proclaimed master into their slave. "I knew that following Jorl was the right move. Even amid all this chaos, even as he fights with his life on the line, he never stops thinking. While I'm focusing on this battle, he's planning all our future battles. This is a man worthy of being my leader, the kind of man I must become if I want to save Verendi from itself." Space. At the armories keeps entrance at the same time. "This is not good. Regular magic is useless." Protector had tried conjuring multiple elemental spells, but the array golem switched from one ceiling array to another the moment the scouts marked a member of the group as the current greatest threat. Lith's final sunsets, Nalron's blast rays, Tista's arrays, soulless combinations of spells, they all got neutralized as soon as any of them tilted the scales of the battle. "Should we use spirit magic?" Solus asked, shattering multiple soldier golems with a single Fury's flight before the shield golems intercepted the flying hammers and sent them crashing harmlessly into the floor. "Save your mana for when you need it. There's something I want to try." Lith bolted forward, launching himself in the midst of the enemy lines to protect his friends from his next spell. Basic Letta, the Tier 1 choke spell, Numbing Spark, bounced off the solid stone of the golems. The cursed lightning scratched their surface and disrupted the magnetic field that kept their bodies and spells together. The stricken golems stumbled, their limbs moving faster or slower than their neighbors with no predictable pattern. Numbing Sparks disrupted the golems' teamwork, making it impossible for them to combine their elemental blasts and maintain a close formation. The second line of golems had to stop their advance whenever they bumped into a slowed construct, while the first line of attackers now had several holes in its ranks due to golems moving faster than their programming ordered. Protector moved with uncanny speed to exploit the construct's inability to deviate from the strategies recorded into their pseudo-cores, striking with burrows at their magic cannons a split second before they fired. The broken barrel caused the elemental blasts to detonate within the soldier golems, and by the time the explosion reached outside, the skull was already gone. Protector had taken Dawn's words and lessons to heart, and now he delayed his attacks a bit to study his opponents before he struck. Thanks to Wild Hunt, He was now not only able to predict where his enemies would move and read the trajectories of their spells, he also understood the enemy tactics and anticipated how they would react to his attacks. Protector moved 2 steps ahead of a thinking enemy and read the limited combat protocols of the golems like an open book. The colossal soldier golem facing Tista also suffered from the same limitations. No matter how many smaller constructs merged together, the attack pattern of the colossus remained the same. Fighting me head-on was a bad move, pal. Golden jolts of vital storm arched across her body. Away from your friends, you're nothing but a big target. Chapter 40, 332, Greatest Gift, Part 2. Every time that Firefang struck the colossal construct, it carved deep gouges in the soldier golem's shell and left behind Tier 5 spells that exploded violently enough to make it falter. On the rare occasions, the colossal golem struck the Hecate. Raging severance covered its limbs with ice and cut the affected areas off from the flow of world energy. Iratho get Rakat. Lith conjured the Tier 3 cinder spell, Fire Stab, to pierce through the golems and have it detonate at the core of their battle formation. While Zero Magic froze mana and world energy into place, Cinder Magic transmitted the kinetic energy it carried upon its victims. A single step turned into a giant leap, and a shift in the center of gravity resulted in a ruinous fall, toppling the golems like domino tiles. The physical damage Fire Stab dealt was barely noticeable, but the countless openings it created in what was supposed to be a clockwork army were devastating. Let me guess I'm going to be the target of the next elemental sealing array, Lith thought. Jarak Sath Scanash. He aimed the Tier 2 Zero spell, Chilling Bite, not at an array golem, but at the cordon of world energy that connected them. Freezing a single golem would have been a waste of mana, since there were plenty of spares circling the battlefield. Hitting the mystical connection that the array golems used to weave their magical formations and coordinate their movements, instead, froze the world energy it carried and all the constructs connected through it. The paralysis caused by Chilling Bite wouldn't last more than a few seconds, but it was far longer than what Quilla needed. She cast the Tier 5 spirit spell, Mana Storm, to generate a hail of emerald bullets that shattered the frozen constructs and shot the scouts out of the sky. This should scramble the golem's information network for a while. Until new scouts arrive or the damaged ones get fixed, the array golems won't be able to pick a target. Elemental magic is a go again, she said via the mind link. Quilla kept herself out of the melee and supported the others from a distance, knowing that with her little body she would have been a hindrance. That's the first good news since we've gotten here. Solus unleashed 6 elemental pillars from the Balor eyes of her sage staff as she cut through the enemy lines. Solus alternated between short bursts of origin flames that blinded the golem's mystical senses and conjuring hard light constructs, shaped like giant spinning nails. The golems felt no pain, so they didn't notice when Solus conjured nails pinned their legs to the ground. Moreover, the burst origin flames brought the golems to a halt until their mystical senses spotted Solus again, and the chase resumed. The golems moved as one, tripping on their comrades nailed to the floor and falling down with a comical synchronicity due to their identical reaction protocols. While the golems sifted through their pseudo-cores for a suitable countermeasure, Solus turned into a whirlwind of hammers and limbs that crushed the soldier golems into pieces before the shields could repel her, and the fixers could save them. She had just moved on to her 5th mark, when the sound of an avalanche accompanied the collapse of the colossal golem. Be careful I didn't defeat it, Tista warned her companions. Each construct retains its own core unit, so destroying them in a single blow is impossible. They must have realized they couldn't beat me and have switched tactics. They realized nothing, Tista, Menadian said as she dodged the ton's heavy raindrops. They are mindless golems. This is just the next step of their programming. We need to do something about it, or this will never end. The Agni and the Skull had taken down dozens of golems each, and so had Lith. Yet breaking down a construct and destroying it for good were 2 completely different matters. The shield golems always blocked the finishing blows and prioritized the rescue of a collapsed unit, giving the maintenance and fixer golems the time to intervene. Most of the fallen scouts had already taken the air again, and new ones had replaced those Quilla had destroyed. The arrays that seal the space, poison my tower side, and hinder our mystical senses also keep track of the position of the golems at all times. Solus' eyes turned watery from the headache of using the eyes of Menadian, even after filtering out everything but the magical formations. Something hidden somewhere in the fortress acts as a central control unit, and uses the arrays to direct the battle and send reinforcements and support wherever we are starting to make some actual damage. Unless we find and destroy it, we will never win. Let's see if I can do something about it then, Lith replied. Jarek scan Guresh. He shaped the Tier 3-0 spell, Arctic Despair, in a circular dome that quickly expanded until it encompassed the widest area that Lith could cover. He needed sheer focus and a bit of cheating not to hurt his friends. He coated himself in the scattered Cinder element and had Arctic Despair target the armory's arrays. The Zero element had to wade through the layers upon layers of mystical runes that filled the air, losing strength as it moved forward. To stay on the safe side, Lith ordered his friends to shrink their size and stuck to the nearest golem, using them as shields from the blast. Arctic Despair merely brushed against the constructs, but it was more than enough to cover them in a thick layer of hoarfrost. Now, upon Lith's signal, everyone unleashed their most destructive elemental spell upwards. The 7 Tier 5 spells reached the ceiling of the armory, releasing their full power across the frozen portion of the arrays, but too far from Lith's group to reach them. The magical formations congealed by Zero cushioned the blasts and fell to the ground in a rain of sparkles. World energy tastes normal now, the Sage Staff said. It worked. Solus turned the fusion reactor off for a few seconds to confirm the staff's words. I can absorb the world energy again. Even better, the golems have lost any semblance of coordination. Quilla exploited the confusion to wrap her adamant chains, bloodbind, around the constructs. Hit them as hard and as fast as you can. Orion's masterpiece transmitted her spells as if Quilla was touching her target, allowing her to employ Forgemastering spells to locate and destroy the golem's pseudo-cores. Lith, Tista, and Solus had just started swinging their weapons and mowing down the directionless constructs when the uppers came out running from the corridor leading to the underground vault. The Storm Griffin had fought beak and talon to escape the death trap and didn't miss the golden opportunity that had just appeared in front of him. Life vision showed Jorl that the area before him was clear of the arrays, and he made a beeline for it. There will be time to fight among us later, Verhin. The uppers broke through by force as Lith's friends regrouped, not to be caught in a pincer attack. First, we need to get rid of our common enemy. Everything else can wait. Chapter 4333 Priceless Lessons, Part 1. Lith charged at the Storm Griffin in reply, his bastard sword raised in a neutral stance. Trust the golems. They are honest in their desire to kill us and will attack everyone indiscriminately, he said via the mind link. Don't let an upper come close to you unless you are certain you can kill them in a single blow. And don't let the uppers inside the safe zone. Solus recognized Uriger's and Salanoth's energy signatures and the poisoned world energy that burned through their mana circulatory systems. Whatever happened to me earlier, it also affected their cursed objects. Oh shit, Quilla put the pieces of the puzzle together. Are you telling me that the invincible king built a fortress inside an array designed to incapacitate both cursed objects and a tower? Doesn't that mean that he was one of the previous hosts of the Black Throne? It's the only possible explanation for Teneb's meteoric rise to power despite his humble origins, and why Solus' divine beast form triggered the fortress's defenses. The mana crystals and metal veins on her body are manifestations of her tower side, and allowed the golem scouts to detect her artifact half. I'm afraid you are right, Menadian replied. During his apprenticeship under the Black Throne, the Invincible must have also learned about how to protect himself against other Mage Tower users. If I'm right, whatever structural weak point the Black Throne identified is still present in modern towers. It would explain everything except why the tainted world energy has no effect on regular artifacts. I think you are wrong, Mom. Solus inwardly shook her head. I find it hard to believe that the Black Throne taught anything about tower crafting to Teneb, and the Invincible King didn't live long enough to learn it on his own. The most likely explanation is that the array he devised targets only artifacts that have a life force. It's the only thing I have in common with cursed objects. Good gods, Quilla gasped in amazement, almost missing the upper who tried to split her head from her neck. Less thinking, more fighting. Lith yelled as he deflected one of Jorl's maces with Ragnarok's guard, intercepted the other with his tail, and kicked the Storm Griffin in the gut. Tista, Protector, Morak, and Nalrond were already giving their all, but aside from the Hecate, everyone else was on their back foot. The mass gap gave the uppers a significant advantage that the life maelstrom made almost impossible to overcome. The area cleared by Lith's Zero spell wasn't large enough for so many divine beasts, and the ground and sky outside were crowded with an army of golems waiting to identify a target to unleash their fury. Tista immediately infused everyone with Vital Storm, but that only made the situation less desperate. I have no spell at the ready or stored inside the mouth that can help me against uppers. We weren't supposed to fight these guys, she thought while releasing the rest of the origin flames stored inside one of her battle claws. The upper was suddenly burning and blinded, and raised his arms to protect his vitals from the attack he knew was about to come. Except it didn't. While the upper released a spell from his skin to douse the origin flames, Tista took several steps back and one deep breath. The jet stream of void flames she hurled struck the upper like a cannonball, but quickly faded away. The life maelstrom and the void flames canceled each other before the upper could suffer any damage, leaving him exposed to the river of blight flames that Tista released from her wings. The upper opened his mouth to scream for help, but the cursed fire's roar covered his voice. Now that she was thrice as fast and strong as her enemy, the Hecate returned to close-quarter combat. Her right battle claw pierced the upper's heart, while her left clawed his head. She twisted and pulled Firefang out, leaving behind 2 gaping holes that she filled with her Dark Ages spell. Ice blackened by the darkness element, it was imbued with covered the upper's body from head to toe. Tista was certain to have killed her enemy, but she smashed the ice statue into pieces with a whip of her tails as she turned to face her next opponent, just to be safe. Nalrun noticed the Titania upper and charged forward, eager to put his skills and new weapon to the test. A long sword made of pure white crystal with only the hilt and guard made of adamant appeared in his hand, releasing a pulse of stroboscopic light. Space. Orion had crafted Shadowbane for the Agni, to thank him for everything Nalrond had done for Freya and the Ernest family. The fact that the Agni was also the father of Orion's unborn grandchildren was the final push that Orion needed to employ every bit of his considerable Forgemastery skill. After learning the basics of light mastery himself, Orion needed but a glance at the way Aaron and Lyria used ice crystals as mediums for their spells to understand the potential of a blade made of a properly cut mana crystal. Dawn had agreed to Lith trying to learn such a technique, and the offer extended to Nalrond as well. The Agni had taken her up on her word, and worked together with Orion to make something that could replicate the uncanny prowess that the horseman had displayed during her spar with Protector. The two had started their research from Nalrond's memories of the fight, studying Dawn's spells one by one. There was nothing in the Erna's legacy about light mastery, and Orion had no plausible justification to access the Royal Forgemaster database. He had to work with cheap yellow crystals to research a crystal-smithing technique, suitable for producing weapons rather than energy sources. He consumed even more yellow crystals in his efforts to craft something that mimicked the effects of Dawn's crystal shield, and the optimal shape and proportions for a crystal weapon's facets. We are lucky that the basic principles of refracting and focusing light are well known, or we'd need years of experiments before getting anything done. Orion used his own light mastery on each prototype to get a feel of his progress, or lack thereof. I know I'm already asking you a lot, but I have one more request. Nalrund had stared at the many adamant tools and countless crystals he would have never been able to afford on his own. He had felt deeply ashamed of being once again forced to rely on someone else to protect those he loved. Ever since he had left his fringe, the Agni had realized how lacking he was in too many aspects, but no matter how hard he worked to overcome his limits, it was never enough. What do you need? Orion had asked while testing the improvement in the conjuring speed and durability of his hard light constructs after channeling his spells through his latest prototype. Please, whatever we learn about crystal weapons, don't add it to the Erna's legacy. Nalrund's request made Orion put down the weapon to look his son-in-law in the eyes. Chapter 4334, Priceless Lessons, Part 2. I know I'm no Forgemaster, and that without you, I wouldn't be able to do anything. I also realize that I must sound shamelessly ungrateful to you, but I want to pass this technique on only to the members of my bloodline. This is the first of many pieces of the Razar's legacy that I'm going to build without Dawn's instructions. I may be the only Agni on Magar at the moment, but there will be 2 more when my children are born. Maybe 3 if Salman manages to fuse his life forces. By the time the kids grow up, I want them to have something that will help them hold their ground against any opponent, no matter what life force they choose. Something that will make them look at their Agni side as something to be proud of, not just a weird monster to be afraid of, like my Razar side was for me. If you stopped talking for a moment, I would have already agreed to your request. Orion had grunted, cutting Nalrond short. I'm already ashamed I can't leave you Freya and the kids nothing but the crumbs of my family's lands and riches just because we don't share the same blood. This new crafting technique will make a perfect gift for your children, my grandchildren. The kingdom may consider your household as just a cadet branch of the Urnas, but I think you deserve your own legacy. I'm more than happy to contribute to the twins' future happiness, son, so stop apologizing and get back to work. We still have a lot to do. Thanks, father. Nalrond had given Orion a deep bow and didn't talk again unless it was to suggest an improvement to their craft. Space. The stroboscopic light blinded Furl the Titania, but Faye didn't rely much on sight to deal with their enemies. Their roots dug deep into the ground whenever they took a step forward, ready to absorb nutrients and allowing them to use Earth vision. The technique was less precise than the Mage Knight's spell, Full Guard, but had a wider range and provided more than the simple location of everything around the Titania. It also allowed her to distinguish between allies and enemies, understand what kind of footwork they were using, and anticipate their next move. Furl used that information to ignore feints and predict when two or more enemies would line up, making it hard for them to dodge her attacks without messing with each other's strategy. She felt the Agni shifting his weight for a lunge, and the following rumble that spread through the ground confirmed her guess. The moron thinks that I'm blinded and has jumped forward, she thought. I can't sense him while he's in midair, but his options are limited. He can't use footwork, and if he flies too high, he'll become target practice for the golems. He has only one path available. She literally planted her forward foot in the ground and punched with her adamant battle gloves at the point where Nalrond was supposed to move to exploit the opening in her guard. Furl combined Life Maelstrom and Thunder Soul to ensure that the puny Agni wouldn't survive, bringing the number of enemies down by one. Her fists connected with something heavy and hard, but it wasn't what she expected. The hard light wall that Nalrond had conjured right after the pulse of light crumbled upon impact and opened the way for Protector. The brunt of the Titania's momentum was gone, the Thunder Soul dispersed, and her movement slowed down as she tried to understand what had just happened. What a moron, as if Fae and plant folks are the only ones with Earth vision. Nalrond had indeed leaped forward, but away from the Titania and onto an upper in his league. I can't face a Titania with my current skills. Or rather, I can take one on, but not one infused with Life Maelstrom. She's way stronger and faster than me, and only needs one hit to turn me into mincemeat. Protector was in midair as well, and exploited the Titania's blindness to put one of his Burrow's maces right in front of her hammer-like fists. The impact sent him into a controlled spin that allowed the skull to add her momentum to his own. Protector's other mace hit Furl in the head with a strength much greater than what Vital Storm bestowed upon him. The Titania's head caved in like a tin can, but her root wasn't there, and the damage started to heal immediately. Protector stepped back, giving up on his advantage to study his opponent through the lenses of his bloodline ability, Wild Hunt. Countless vines erupted below where his feet would have been had he continued the attack, hitting only air. She's fast and Full Guard would have missed those tendrils until they emerged from the ground. By then they would have been too close for me to dodge, the Skull thought. Dawn was right. I can't afford to be reckless against an opponent on my level. Luckily for me, I'm still faster than most Fae. Vital Storm was inferior to Life Maelstrom, but Titanias were famous only for their strength, while even Bright Violet Cord awakened found it hard to follow the Skull's natural movements. Protector combined his slight speed advantage with the predictive abilities of Wild Hunt to turn Furl's strength against her. If she extended her limbs into a spear-like thrust, he aligned the edges of Burrows with her attack, so that she would cut herself on the blade. When she charged forward, Protector stepped back and threw Burrows with all his strength. The Titania ended up ramming into the adamant maces, turning the Skull's attack into perfect counters that more than doubled their destructive power. Your Thunder Soul is useless if you don't hit. Even at close range, Protector would keep his guard up and release Tier 5 spells from point blank. What about using Frost Soul? You'd like that, don't you? Furl snarled, hitting the ground under her feet with all her strength and turning it into a crater. Stop biting me like a mosquito and fight. Her attempt to disrupt the Skull's footwork failed, earning her one blow to the left arm and leg. Furl couldn't use Frost Soul without affecting the entire battlefield, potentially messing up with her allies' strategy. Protector knew that a Fae's regenerative abilities were faster the closer the damage was to their root's position. and he inflicted upon her light strikes to pinpoint the mana organ. There it is, he thought. According to Solus, uppers can't move their weak spots until they revert to their original life force. It must be the reason the Titania hid her root inside her left fist. Between her adamant armor and battle gloves, it's the best protected section of her body. He stepped to the side just in time to avoid the Tier 5 spirit spell, Bone Grinder. The earth and light elements made the spell as hard as a diamond. The air element surrounding the emerald pillar cut everything like a blender, and darkness magic coated Bone Grinder like poison. Upon piercing the skull, the fire element would release the remaining kinetic energy of the spell in a massive explosion, while the water element would freeze the wounds and make them impossible to heal. Chapter 40, 335 Turning Tides, Part 1. The evasive maneuver bought Protector only a split second, since all spirit spells were imbued with the willpower of their caster and relentlessly chased their target. Protector was now 2 against 1, the Titania and the emerald pillar of Bone Grinder keeping themselves on opposite sides to restrict his movements. He answered to the two-pronged attack with 2 Tier 5 spirit spells, Phoenix Smash. The first burst of emerald flames clashed against Bone Grinder, and the 2 spells canceled each other. The second Phoenix Smash, instead, was infused with all the vital storm Protector had left and aimed at the Titania's left fist. The mystical fire conjured by spirit magic burned through metal and flesh alike, engulfing Furl's hand. After becoming an upper, the Titania had gained the mass of a divine beast, but she had kept her original size not to offer the golems an easy target. Moreover, her old Fey equipment wouldn't cover a single claw of her upper form. Phoenix Smash devoured Furl's wrist and fingers, working its way toward the palm. The Titania screamed in pain as death reverted her body into a beautiful rose, and a soldier golem shot Protector in the back. Shit, I'm isolated and surrounded. I focused so much on the upper that I left the safe area without noticing. Now that I don't have Vital Storm, I can't dodge all the golem's blasts, he thought. Meanwhile, Solus scrambled for her life. She was nowhere as fast as Protector, and she had yet to learn how to use a single one of her human bloodline abilities. If not for the 9 copies of the Fury orbiting her and the spirit barrier of her armor blocking the Phase attack, she would have already been beaten into a pulp. Are all demons this weak, or is it just you? The Firbolg upper asked. I was afraid you were another of the Verhins who had awakened a bloodline as strong as a Tiamat, but clearly I was wrong. His body coursed with life maelstrom, and every time his adamant morning star hit, the Thunder Soul would send a Fury crashing deep into the ground and fill her spirit barrier with cracks. Said someone who wouldn't amount to shit without borrowed bloodline abilities, Solus retorted. Even I don't know how to call myself yet, but at least this is all me. Are Firbolgs so pathetic that you needed to sell yourself to the incontinent king for power? Fae were power-hungry but prideful creatures, so her words cut deep. I don't follow that loser anymore. I'm one of the Stormlord's elite now, Gilger roared. You look like an upper to me, incontinent boy. Here, my treat. Her comment cut even deeper, but the final blow was Elijah's dirty cloth diaper that Solus threw at the Firbolg's face. Gulgurth bellowed in fury and activated his Firbolg bloodline ability, Unbridled Growth. Weeds, flowers, and even trees grew at a speed visible to the naked eye and came rushing at Solus like a green tide. The rising vegetation slowed her enough for the Firbolg to catch up with her and break past her defenses. You're mine now? The sage staff blocked his morning star, but Thunder Souls hurt both the Yggdrasil wood and its wielder. I shall enjoy killing you much more than I should. The pleasure is all mine. Solus' human mana organs were still atrophied, but her lungs and heart worked just fine. She released a blast of void flames from all over her body as she grabbed the Firbolg, burning the life maelstrom that empowered him. The blight flames erupted from her throat next, and blew Gilger's head open. Still alive, not for long, she said after witnessing bones and veins growing out of the cauterized wound on the neck. The Fae had nothing left but his natural abilities, whereas Solus had the vital storm and the extra mass of the tower. She furled her wings around the 8 copies of the Furies, and then flapped them with all of her considerable strength, turning the Davros hammers into small meteors. The Furies' flight enchantment put the final nail in the Firbolg's coffin. The gravity field that shrouded the hammers and the fire and darkness crystals multiplied the already considerable destructive power of the Furies by several folds. Solus needed only 6 hammers to blow away Gilger's limbs and destroy his root. She sent the other 2 flying across the battlefield to push back the golem's advance. I admit you are much stronger than I am, even without the life maelstrom, Nalrund said while conjuring one hard light construct after another. Too bad this isn't an arm wrestling contest. The Agni was slower and his mass much smaller than his opponent's, but neither meant much since he didn't even try to get close to the Sphinx upper. Each one of Shadowbane's facets manipulated a different construct, altering its size, density, and repairing it when necessary. Whenever the Sphinx's mighty adamant claws hit a construct, it turned into a thick, viscous substance as soft as a pillow. The impact slowed the attack enough for the nearest construct to intercept Rasha's claws as well and sap more of its momentum. To make matters worse, the soft light blobs didn't disperse on impact. They stuck to the Sphinx's body and limbs in the form of pools of light that constantly formed elastic tendrils between them. Life Maelstrom made the Sphinx so strong that she could effortlessly crush a single tendril, but there were dozens of them, and more kept forming with each passing second. Rasha felt as if she were swimming against a current, and no matter how many constructs she shattered, Nalrund sent new ones crashing against her. The Agni had no qualms about also throwing golems at her, or unleashing focused heat rays at her vitals, whenever she stumbled because of a particularly thick bundle of light tendrils. "Stop running, you coward!" She imbued part of the life maelstrom in her legs for a sprint, and the rest in her weapon to kill the annoying pest in one blow. "Make me!" Nalrund focused vital storm in his eyes, ears, and legs to amplify both his natural and mystical senses. The moment Earth Vision relayed to him the violence of the impact of paws against rock and full guard read Rasha's trajectory, the Agni recalled the dozens of constructs that floated in a defensive formation around him. Shadowbane absorbed the mana Nalrund had infused them with, making the construct's mass its own. Shields, spears, and buzzsaws merged into a colossal blade that used the crystal sword as its framework. The facets along Shadowbane's surface created a complex network of rivets that redistributed the weight and supported the hard light's mass from the inside like a skeleton, enhancing its structural integrity. Rasha was already jumping forward when she noticed the beam of light coming at her, except it was no beam, but a several 100-kilo heavy blade on which her own change impaled her. Nalrund emitted the Tier 4 spirit magic spell, Piercing Star, from the construct, detonating the Sphinx from the inside. "I did it," Nalrund clenched Shadowbane, struggling to believe his own eyes. "I defeated a divine beast by myself." "A little help here." Morok's yell cut the Agni's joy short and drew everyone's attention to him. Chapter 4336 Turning Tides, Part 2. The tyrant and his wife were struggling to keep the hordes of golems at bay, while keeping the Scorpicore upper that was chasing them from killing them. Seriously, Quilla's bloodbind chains whipped furiously at the black leonine beast that had just tried to bite her in half. "You're a Scorpicore, a lesser divine beast. How could you join Joral's side when the foremother of your species ascended to guardianhood?" "Good question." The upper had 2 sets of wings and eyes like a Sekhmet, but the wings were all membranous like a bat's, and his eyes shone with the red light of undeath instead of fire. "Here's another. Do you know what a Sekhmet can do?" "No." Morok dodged a cannonade of the golem's elemental blasts, using domination to alter their trajectory enough to send them inside the Scorpicore's open maw. "And neither does anyone else," Tertia roared, ignoring the pain from his tongue freezing, burning, and rotting at the same time. "While my so-called ancestor takes her sweet time doing whatever she wants, those like me suffer. I'm just taking what's rightfully mine. It's all Scarlet's fault if I'm doing this. If only she cared about her descendants as she claims to, she would have taught us Scorpicores how to become Sekhmets, and I wouldn't have been forced to become an upper. Wow, this guy must be Meln's secret son. Nothing he does is his own fault." Quilla conjured a spirit barrier to repel the charge of the upper, but Thunder's soul blew it apart like a balloon. "How dare you?" Tertia unleashed a Tier 5 spirit spell, Primordial Roar. The freezing shockwave generated by the Hexelemental spell would have seriously wounded the couple if the tyrant hadn't jumped behind a line of soldier golems with his wife in his arms. The Scorpicore's powerful spell destroyed several constructs while the couple just focused on escaping, so the golem army marked the divine beast as the most dangerous threat and focused their fire on him. "I love it when you are right, babe, but it's not wise to mock someone who can kill us with one hit and is already trying to murder us," Morok said. "I'd like to go back to our children alive." "Point taken." Quilla racked her brain, but couldn't find a way out of their predicament. There wasn't enough space to dodge the Scorpicore upper for long, and the constant flow of golems swarming the area left the couple little space of maneuver. Protector had his speed, Nalrund had his new weapon and Dawn's teachings, while Lith, Tista, and Solus were divine beasts. Morok and Quilla had no special ability and couldn't defeat an opponent of Tertiar's caliber unless they played it smart. Something hard to do when a giant monster chased you and countless golems shot at you from every direction. What about your little human friends, Verhin? Jorl and Lith were locked in a savage exchange of blows. Are you going to let them die like that? The Tiamat replied by shapeshifting into his Indech form and using Umbral Shift to swap position with his shadow. The Storm Griffin had put his entire weight and focus point in his blow, so when it hit empty air, Jorl ended up tumbling into a unit of soldier golems ready to shoot Lith in the back. The Storm Griffin crushed the golems, took an elemental volley to his face, and Ragnarök into his back. The spirit barrier of the Starpath armor activated by itself, stopping the angry blade before it could so much as scratch the adamant. The Black Throne believed Jorl to be more than capable of fighting anyone standing before him, and that even the Storm Griffin's fair-weathered allies shared such conviction. It was the reason the Cursed Tower had Forgemastered the Starpath armor with a backside thicker and sturdier than its front. No matter if Orpal or one of Jorl's so-called loyalists betrayed him first, the Storm Griffin would survive until the Black Throne decided otherwise. Lith grunted at the hitch in his plan, but didn't turn to help Morok and Quilla. If he did, Jorl would have killed him. The Storm Griffin had already infused himself with more life maelstrom and bounced off the golems so fast that Lith could barely follow him with 7 eyes. You should have taken my truce offer, Verhin, Jorl said. If you did, I would have used this against these annoying constructs instead of you. He unfurled his wings and activated the Tier 5 source magic spell, Battle Arms. It dismantled one of Jorl's best light mastery spells and the Tier 5 War Mage spell, Mud Tide, recombining them into something that bordered on tower magic. The light and earth element formed dozens of limbs as hard as diamonds. The water element allowed the earth to alter its density and shapeshift quickly, while the fire element triggered a violent explosion the moment the light earth constructs hit something. When battle arms hit, the detonation would amplify the damage or disrupt Lith's footwork. When Jorl used the constructs to block Lith's attacks or spells, instead, the explosions knocked Ragnarök away and blinded the Tiamat's mystical senses. That's too big a fight even for a sexy midget like me, Menadian thought. Lith can take care of that pompous bird by himself, but Quilla and Morok need my help. Ignored by golems and uppers alike, the first ruler of the flames remained hidden among the shadows until Tertiar was kind enough to offer his back to her. A jet stream of void flames dissolved his life maelstrom, and Menadian's fury hit the Scorpicor's back of the head, sending him to crash amid the golem's formation. Thanks, Riffa. Quilla had 2 Tier 5 spirit spells at the ready with Tertiar's name written on them, but Menadian stopped her. Forget about that moron, she yelled through the mind link. We just went from the frying pan into the fire. Uriger and Salanoth had been tossed like garbage in the middle of the area free of the cursed carrion array, and a few uppers had already lost their lives, but their unwilling sacrifice had bought the cursed objects the time they needed to recover. Such an extensive mana poisoning would have crippled a living person for minutes and left them in a state of confusion for even longer. The living legacies, however, had never lost their consciousness, not even while cursed carrion ravaged their pseudo-cores. The Book of Knowledge and the Ring of Space had followed the events all along, using their hosts to prepare spells as the flow of pure world energy restored their strength. Now I'm really angry. Uriger covered most of the battlefield in arrays in a single heartbeat, crushing golems into powder and disrupting the cursed carrion magical formation. I usually don't bother crushing mindless toys, but I almost died because of you. The human host used his breathing technique to replenish the mana reserves that the Book of Knowledge burned through by conjuring one of the devastating Tier 5 spirit spells stored in his page after another. Uriger didn't bother aiming, shooting them wherever the battle was fiercer. His targets were the golems, but he didn't care if the members of Lith's group or his own ended up caught in the crossfire. Chapter 40, 337 Sumner Stone, Part 1. Whenever one of Uriger's spells hit a member of Lith's group, the Cursed Book considered it a lucky bonus. Whenever one of his allies was struck down, he merely considered it collateral damage. Disengage and regroup, Lith ordered via the mind link. Under the hail of spells, the cannonade of elemental blasts, and the attacks of constructs and upper alike, The chaos of the battlefield had turned into a blazing inferno. He was afraid of what might happen in any of them, remained isolated and surrounded by enemies. Yet even his paranoia couldn't predict what Salanoth was doing under the cover of Uriger's fury. These stupid magical formations blocked my best abilities and still do, but someone was so kind to open a hole in the array's rune matrix. It created a structural weak point from which I can infiltrate the magical formations and replace their original missing runes with my own. Normally, it would be impossible, but the lack of an imprint makes arrays vulnerable to the external influence of someone who knows what they are doing. I'm a living legacy. My mind and body are made of runes. I can take over this old junk and manipulate it like I would another layer of my pseudo-cores. The Ring of Space was confident of her abilities, and the more she infiltrated the rune grid that comprised the warehouse's arrays, the greater the control she gained over the battlefield. Remarkable, she thought. Teneb was no dimensional mage, but he used what the Black Throne taught him about the various specializations to create something far beyond the dimensional magic knowledge of his time. One of the arrays tracks the position of the golems and directs their movements, while another allows the scouts to mark the enemies and assign them a priority level based on the damage they cause as the battle unfolds. The combined effect of the scouts' marking system and arrays' tracking abilities gives all the other constructs the best next thing to spatial awareness. As long as the two arrays can communicate, the golems can shoot at their enemies and follow their movements regardless of distance or cloaking items. Moreover, since each enemy's threat level is constantly evaluated, the constructs give the impression of having limited intelligence, and their protocols are not as rigid as they would otherwise be. These arrays are the reason the golems can adapt their strategy based on the enemy's actions and tip the scales of the battle to their advantage despite being one-trick ponies. Salanoth's assessment of the Invincible King's skills was on point. The assessment of her own capabilities, however, was not. Overriding the dimensional arrays was easy for someone like her who had been crafted to be the ultimate dimensional ring, and whose dimensional runes far outclassed the arrays. Once she was done with the dimensional formations and moved on to the others, she found herself to be helpless. The runes of the arrays didn't match those of her pseudo-cores and rejected them violently. It wasn't just a matter of her runes belonging to a different era and being more complex, but also due to Teneb's careful preparations. The non-dimensional arrays refused the imprint in Salanoth's mana and poisoned it with the cursed Carrion magical formation. The anti-cursed objects array still coated the entire warehouse, sparing only the area that Lith's zero spells had cleansed. Every further attempt to spread her influence outside that small space ended with Salanoth drinking more of that acrid poison. "Fuck Teneb and his ridiculous paranoia," she snarled. "It doesn't matter. This is more than enough. I'm going to show everyone what I can do and squash Verhin like a bug." "Don't attack the constructs and they'll leave you alone," she actually yelled. "Focus on Verhin and his friends. The enemy of my enemy is my ally." Nalrund recognized Salanoth and pressed the biggest violet crystal on the black sphere, yet nothing happened. The second and third attempts ended in failure as well. "Are you sure?" Uriger stopped the onslaught, and suddenly all the golems ignored him, training their weapons at the members of Lith's group instead. "I'm in control now," the Ring of Space replied with a cruel laughter. "As long as you morons behave, I'll lead you to the easiest victory of your life." "Fuck me sideways," Lith's group said as one. The upper shared no mind link due to the earlier mana poisoning, and being forced to speak out loud had exposed their plan. The problem was that there was nothing anyone could do about it. The scouts kept marking the uppers as threats, but Salanoth blocked their mana pulses and provided the array's mainframe with altered data. The golems had become unwitting allies of the uppers, more than doubling the pressure on Lith's group. To make matters worse, Acton had remained in the backline until that moment to cover Joral's back from the tide of golems that had chased the uppers out of the vault. With the constructs under Salanoth's control, the Bastet joined his companions. Acton's equipment was the perfect size for a bright violet-cored divine beast, and he had no qualms about using the massive edge of his spear, Ashen Dread, to force those smaller than him to choose between being cut in half or throwing themselves at the golem army waiting outside the safe zone. "Can't we warp away?" Morak asked as he spun his hammers in front of him and shot elemental beams from his eyes to block as many elemental blasts as he could. "What about the home stone?" "It's too late for that," Lith explained. Zero cleared this area from the dimensional ceiling and space-compressing arrays, but the cursed ring has somehow restored them. My connection with the home stone outside has been severed again. I could use swirling wind to clear a small area, but I doubt our enemies will be so gracious that they'll let us cross over without a complimentary stab in the back. Moreover, if swirling wind suffers even a minor displacement, the dimensional door will collapse, and anyone who is still passing through will die. I have a plan, Nalrun chimed in. Just use swirling wind and... The focused fire of the soldier golem struck in the middle of the group, generating a powerful explosion and sending those lighter than a divine beast flying. Everyone was now surrounded by a golem unit and had to face at least one upper. Hello, Lady Verhin. I'm curious to see how much you share with your cousin aside from your resemblance. Jorl landed in a 2-foot stomp right where Solus had been until a split second before. She saved her life only by riding the remaining shockwave of the explosion to roll away. The ears of Menadian had read the flow of the storm griffin's mana and allowed her to anticipate his trajectory. Jorl was so strong that the impact with the ground opened a 12-meter-deep crater and caused a localized earthquake that reached the surface. Solus got back on her feet with a kip-up and hurled a jet stream of void and blight flames to force the storm griffin to retreat. Contrary to her expectations, Jorl dived against the silvery fire and dodged the black one, refusing to lose his advantage. Chapter 40, 338 Sumner Stone, Part 2. Nice trick, Lady Verhin, but I've been hit by those weird fires enough times to know how they work. The storm griffin smiled through a gritted beak. Only the black origin flames dispel life maelstrom. All the others just hurt, and hurting is a game two can play. He swung Dusk Wraith with a skill that was much more impressive when one faced the maces up close instead of from the safety of Lith's finger. Jorl pressed forward without giving Solus any opening or way out. One mace always followed the other, acting as a shield ready to intercept any counter. Solus had recovered her human body for a little over a year and gained her divine beast form for a little over a week. Her combat skill was nowhere comparable to Jorl's, and she knew it. Please hold, don't break, don't break. Even with the ears of Menadian's help, she was weaker and much slower than the Storm Griffin. Dusk Wraith was a divine beast-sized weapon, whereas the Fury and the Staff were not. When Solus was forced to block, she conjured a copy of the Fury that always shattered on impact, leaving her arm numb for a few seconds. Each destroyed copy drained part of the Fury's energy reserves, but it beat blocking with the real Fury and maybe losing it forever. Solus cast the Spirit spell, Griffin Fetters, followed by her Tier 4 Spirit Mastery spell, Diamond Cutter. Jorl shattered the emerald chains by flexing his muscles and crushed the golden drill with a single blow of Dusk Wraith before looming over the helpless Solus. Is this all you can do? Pathetic. She tried to escape again, but Jorl cast a Griffin Fetters of his own that was now restricting her movements. The mace hit her square in the stomach, shattering her armor, breaking her ribs, and squeezing the air out of her blood-filled lungs. One Verhin down, only 2 more to go. He was still speaking when Dusk Wraith came down on Solus' head like a meteor. Space. Acton lunged at Lith the moment the explosion separated him from the rest of the group. The Bastet Upper considered him the greatest threat to his plans, and for a good reason. No matter how unfavorable the odds he faced or the number of his enemies, Lith Verhin always came on top. There was no apparent rhyme or reason for that, but no one could argue with the results. The records of Lith's career spoke for themselves, and neither Acton nor the Cursed Book could risk ending up as another notch on Lith's resume. Dragons are notoriously weak to cold. What about Tiamats? Uriger conjured one frozen wasteland after another, aiming them at the only retreat path that the combined attacks of Acton and the golems left Lith. It was a Tier 5 spell devised by an ancient world tree to deal with greedy dragons that had become widespread after one of the many fights between chroniclers and divine beasts. Lith had already faced it in the past and did all he could to avoid a direct hit, but frozen wastelands cold affected him even from a distance. The water element caused the temperature to drop by over 100 degrees, and the air element removed the humidity in the area, one effect reinforcing the other. Lith took a deep breath to conjure origin flames in his lungs, using them to warm himself from within while also pushing the heating system of the Voidwalker armor to its limits. Your spells are working, Salinath nodded as she brought the soldier golems embossed with water crystal forward. Verhin is like a house of cards, he only needs one push to fall. Inside the hole created by the zero element, The ring of space controlled everything. She had no trouble releasing hundreds of wands and a few artifacts from her pocket dimension. The alchemical tools released more ice bullets, while chains and nails respectively restricted the Tiamat and pinned his limbs to the floor. You were a great opponent, but it was only a matter of time before luck turned her back on you. Uriger conjured griffin fetters infused with silver lightning, slamming the Tiamat against the floor. No dimensional magic and alone against us plus an army of golems. What could you possibly do? The Book of Knowledge smirked, and Lith's whole world went black. Space. We need to do something? Tista fought like the demon she was, unleashing every spell stored in the mouth of Menadian and conjuring all the flames she had mastered. If we don't help Lith and Solus, they are going to die. Yet she failed to take a single step forward. The golems coming from inside the keep and all over the defensive walls had surrounded the rest of the group. For each construct they destroyed, 3 more joined their ranks. The uppers made everything worse by raining spells on Lith's friends after infusing their mana with silver lightning. Protector didn't have enough space to move, and Nalron's arrays shattered seconds after he conjured them. Quilla helped him however she could, but the pressure rose with each passing second, and soon the dam of the combined spirit barriers would break. For the gods' sake, stop yelling and listen. Nalron used one of his constructs to grab Tista from behind and force her back into the battle formation. Use swirling wind, now. A home stone? Tista's voice oozed disgust at the sight of the artifact in the Agni's hand. Do you want to run away and leave them behind? A summoner stone. Nalron corrected her, and those 3 words were enough to pierce through the veil of her fury. The Agni emptied his mana core to create several barriers and infused them with spirit magic, buying enough time for the Hecate to shapeshift into her Indech form. Tista had barely the time to clear the space between her wings from Salanoth's energy signature when the Agni's shelter collapsed. His hard light constructs only offered the golems a bigger target, and the uppers had helped them by hitting the barriers hard with their thunder soul. Shards of light and a barrage of explosions sent Tista and the others flying. Yet one brief instant was enough. Nalron had kept the crystal pressed the entire time so that the chaos sealed inside the summoner stone had pierced through the small opening created by Tista's swirling wind. A chaos steps didn't bend space, it pierced through it. The enchantments of the summoner stone came out of the closest set of dimensional coordinates that Nalron had marked, forming a second chaos steps. Without the influence of the dimensional ceiling and space-compressing arrays, the steps covered hundreds of kilometers, reaching the first point recorded in the summoner stone. From there, the enchantments found their way home and opened a chaos steps that crossed thousands of kilometers. They reappeared in the middle of the ocean and opened another, losing another chunk of their energy with every new steps they conjured. When the summoner stone's enchantments reached the Archduchy of Essagar, there was barely any energy left to them. Only enough to record the set of dimensional coordinates from which the signal had departed and transmit it to the artifact's true master. Chapter 4339 No Nickname, Part 1. Space. 1 Verhin down, only 2 more to go. Jorl was still speaking when Dusk Wraith came down on Solus' head like a meteor. Nah, a mocking voice said as something hit the storm griffin like an avalanche, crushing his spirit barrier, starpath armor, and body despite the life maelstrom enhancing their toughness tenfold. No dimensional magic and alone against us plus an army of golems. What could you possibly do? The Book of Knowledge smirked, and Lith's whole world went black. The Tier 5 Chaos spell, Void Hunger, erased an entire squadron of golems, Salanoth's artifacts, and Uriger's spells from existence without so much as scratching the Tiamat's Voidwalker armor. Lith's blindness lasted less than a second, and when he could see again, he had no idea what had just happened. Boy, the voice cut through the roars of elemental blasts and explosions like a hot knife through butter. This isn't part of our deal. If you called me here only to save your life, you and I are going to have a problem. Tezca the Sun Eater punched the air above him without using fusion magic or releasing a spell. Yet the resulting shockwave cleared the area around the Rizar of golems and noise alike. There, among his many talents, Nalrund had the gift of brevity. That's the one you're looking for. Tezca's eyes followed the extended claw and met Salanoth's terrified gaze. No, she cursed her bad luck in all the languages she had learned over the millennia. Anyone but him. That insignificant girl, golems knew no fear and attacked Tezca the moment the scouts and the Ring of Space marked him for extermination. Are you sure? The constructs charged at him in droves and fell in droves. Their elemental blasts bounced harmlessly over the Filgja's silver and black fur, whereas his 10 tails swatted the golems down like pesky flies. The stone bodies of the constructs didn't just break. They turned into dust, vapor, frozen shards, lost their enchantments, split into their base materials, or just disappeared. Yes, the Agni nodded. She's the one who's sealing the space. Didn't you notice how she controlled those artifacts from a distance? Wasn't that spirit magic? Tezca had not recovered life vision, so he needed a quick spell to confirm Nalron's words. Order and chaos, you are right. That was a mix of gravity and dimensional magic. Remarkable. If the space is sealed, how in the gods' names did that guy get in? Jorl asked as the healing spells of the Starpath armor restored his spine and lungs enough for him to breathe again. That guy is the legendary Tezca the Sun-Eater, Salanoth said. He must have found a way to apply the chaos element to dimensional magic and tear the space open when he warps. You can't see it, but there's a dimensional rift where he appeared. Only time or a special spell can close it. You noticed that? Tezca's ears twitched in surprise. Color me surprised. Meeting a fellow dimensional mage is already rare. Bestowing any level of dimensional awareness upon a cursed object is something that's supposed to be impossible, let alone creating an artificial dimensional mage of your caliber. I would be tempted to spare you if you didn't carry the stench of that loser of Meln Narchat on you. Do you mind telling me who created you, kid? The ring of space had already shapeshifted her host into her upper form, and the smell of Orpal's blood that wafted through the air was strong enough to make Tezca retch. Verhen is one thing, but the Sun-Eater. A Dracupper took a few steps towards the exit. If we stay here, we're dead. A Treentupper reverted to his fey form, knowing that his divine beast size and mass offered him no protection against the Filgja. I don't answer dead Filgjas. Salanoth ignored her fellow uppers and stared Tezca in the eyes. Goodbye. Tezca smiled at her naivety and swept his tails at the incoming battalion of golems. You are not getting out of here, kid. Not until a snap of the Ring of Space's fingers cut him short. The volley of elemental blasts hit him with the force of a speeding train, and his tails now harmlessly bounced off the line of shield golems. Tezca tried to dodge, but he was too slow. He tried to shove the constructs away, but the same punches that until a moment ago had produced a small-scale natural disaster now wouldn't affect anyone but their immediate target. Kill him while he's weak, Salanoth roared. Don't give him the time to come up with some trick to save his skin. How did you do that? Tezca conjured a Tier 4 chaos magic, Void Hollow, to block the construct's relentless barrage. How did you cut me off my Sun-Eater spell? I didn't just charge in here like a moron. I checked, and this place has no enchantment powerful enough to do that. As I said, I don't answer dead Filgjas, old fox. A wave of the Ring of Space's hand recalled the adamant and Davros fragments of her destroyed artifact, bringing them close enough to activate their self-repair abilities. At the same time, Jorl infused Uriger and Salanoth with more life maelstrom that the Book of Knowledge used to conjure 3 sets of griffin fetters. The first one wrapped itself around Void Hollow and shattered it. The second set bound Tezca's limbs and suppressed his aura, while the third bundle of griffin fetters chained him to the ground, limiting his mobility. The uppers saw his strength plummet via life vision and felt it in their guts. The paralyzing fear that had numbed their limbs until a moment ago, and the desperate cries to run away of their survival instinct, were gone. 3 uppers charged at the Filgja, striking at him with their weapons infused to the brim with Thunder Soul. The other uppers had to wait their turn. Uriger had already unleashed another volley of Tier 5 spirit spells, and he wouldn't hesitate to sacrifice an ally to achieve a kill shot. The enchanted adamant weapons pierced through Tezca's vitals and came out from the other side, while Uriger's spell blew up large sections of the Filgja's body, spreading the stench of burned fur. What about now? The Filgja coughed up a mouthful of black blood. Don't I deserve to at least know the identity of the genius who orchestrated my demise? You deserve nothing, you monster. Salanoth foamed at the mouth, feeling her programming overriding her rationality. Stop pretending to be defeated. I've lived long enough to know when someone is deadly wounded and when they are just suppressing their strength. In my defense, I wasn't pretending. Tezca flexed his muscles, snapping the weapons trapped inside his body into multiple parts and regenerating his damaged tissues. I only recently got this new body, and I've yet to test its limits. You and your loser friends are the perfect sparring partners for a little warm-up. Before his assailants could react, Tezca's fur formed thick black spikes that pierced through the upper's enchanted protections and drained their vitality with abomination touch. You should have taught your little friends that it's never a good idea to get too close to someone like me, kid. Chapter 4340 No Nickname, Part 2. The Ring of Space cursed her long-dead maker, and had the soldier golems resume their onslaught while the array golems surrounded the Sun Eater and prepared a darkness-sealing array. Unfortunately for her, their attacks were back to being ineffective. The reason I don't usually use my equipment is that I don't need it, kid, Tezca said, as what looked like black ink crawled across his body and took the form of his Sun Eater armor. Yet I'm no arrogant idiot. I knew that relying solely on my Sun Eater spell would have got me killed since the day I turned into an eldritch. I didn't reach my age because I was lucky enough never to meet someone who knew about my weaknesses, but because I was wise enough to prepare for the moment it inevitably happened. Others before you sealed my Sun Eater spell, yet it wasn't enough. I have many more quivers in my arrows that earned me no nickname because no one who witnessed them lived to tell the tale. A horizontal slash of his endless night blade cut through the golem's attacks, the golems, and then the ground below them, opening a fissure so deep that only a demon's keen eyes could see its bottom. Throw as many toys as you want at me. The ending will always be the same. Tezca splayed the fingers of his left hand and conjured the Tier 4 chaos spell Morning Rain. Countless chaos rays bolted in every direction, taking down constructs, demolishing the armory's buildings, and severely injuring uppers. Only Lith and his friends were spared from the onslaught. The chaos projectile fell so quickly and in such numbers that they enveloped the Filgja's stupefied allies like a black curtain. They blocked vision and incoming attacks alike, but they never came close to hurting those that Morning Rain was meant to protect. Mid the mayhem, Tezca exerted surgical control of his spells as he tried to identify and destroy the source of his sudden weakness. Fixer, soldier, scout, and maintenance golems crumbled, never to rise again. The invincible king's fortress that had endured the passing of millennia collapsed and fell in a handful of seconds under the fury of a single spell. The arrays surrounding the armory gave their all to stop the Sun Eater, but to no avail. Tezca stood at the center of the hole in the defensive formations that Lith had created. No array could reach him while he struck directly at the open wound in their fabric and flooded it with chaos, making it fester. The uppers survived Morning Rain simply because they were not its targets. Their equipment, what they had left of Joral's life maelstrom, and Salanoth's dimensional arrays saved their lives. The Ring of Space couldn't match either the savagery or the destructive power of the cursed element of darkness, but she could displace it to a safe distance. Her dimensional formation, Null Fortress, was a cylindrical barrier that opened small gates whenever something or someone came in contact with it, moving them to the opposite side of its boundaries. Usually, Salanoth's mastery over space allowed her to redirect the incoming attacks in whatever direction she wanted, but Morning Rain was too much for her. One mistake and Null Fortress might have missed more bolts of chaos than it already did. Salanoth had invented that spell to deflect single powerful attacks like Silverwing's Annihilation or many average spells at the same time. Not a volley of spells, each one of which carried enough destructive power to level a noble household. A few chaos projectiles managed to get in, but Uriger intercepted most of them with his barriers, and the uppers endured those he missed thanks to their divine beast's constitution. How in the world can you call him weak, Salanoth? Joral said via a mind link as he assessed his odds of survival and found them inexistent. The Sun Eater is indeed weaker than before, but he's far from weak. Even without his Sun Eater spell, Tezca had his Endless Night Blade in his hand and his Blade Tier spell, Unbreakable Bond. It allowed him to absorb the energy of the power cores of his equipment and turn it into mana and physical strength. As long as Unbreakable Bond was active, Tezca was akin to a living blade spell that could unleash its strength one bit at a time instead of all at once. In theory, using enough power to take down an enchanted fortress was supposed to drain Tezca's equipment. Even the best power cores could only hold so much mana, and after depleting them, Tezca would have nothing but his own mana and a fancy pile of Davros. It was the reason Tezca had researched and applied a unique set of runes whose only purpose was to absorb world energy at high speed to endless night. Back when the Sun Eater was an eldritch, it was the only way he could wield the blade without the chaos of his touch devouring endless night like it did everything else. Now that Tezca had a physical form again, all the world energy absorbed by the blade through the set of runes became nourishment for his body and fuel for his spells. Jorl is right, Uriger nodded. We've already acquired a lot of adamant in our previous expeditions. There is no point in risking our lives for a bit more. Tezca got rid of the armory's space-compressing arrays for us. Nothing stops us from leaving. Speak for yourself, Salanoth cursed. I won't leave until he's dead or I am. Don't be foolish, Salanoth, Jorl said. What would fighting someone as powerful as the Sun Eater achieve? Even if we somehow defeat him, then what? How is that supposed to help us? You don't understand, she shook her head. It's not that I don't agree with you, I just can't run away. I was created for the purpose of killing that God's damned Filgja. Now that he's in front of me, I can't resist the kill order my maker forced onto me. I have to fight him. Tough luck, sister. Uriger warped everyone away as soon as the hail of chaos rays stopped, but Jorl grabbed the cursed book's host by the arm before he could cross the dimensional passage himself. Not so fast, the Storm Griffin said. Salanoth is one of our strongest members. Without her, our chances of defeating Orpal will plummet. We can't abandon her without even trying. And what do you suggest we do? We charge forward and hope for the best, Uriger sneered. That's Tezca the Sun Eater. He kills those like us for breakfast and fights guardians during his lunch break. Everyone on Magur knows and respects his name. Can you say the same about yourself? No, but Salanoth was created for this fight, Jorl replied. Forbidden magic is used to achieve tasks that are considered impossible for regular magic, tasks like killing the Sun Eater. Salanoth's maker must have put at least one ace in her sleeve. I have many aces, and they are tailored to counter Tezca's abilities. The Ring of Space hated revealing her secrets, but that didn't go against her programming and increased her chances of success. According to my maker's most conservative estimates, they should be enough to accomplish my mission. Chapter 4341, Dimensional Magic's Apex, Part 1. Then how come Tezca's still alive, and why didn't you ever mention or use any of your alleged god-killer weapons during one of our previous fights? The Book of Knowledge found Salanoth's claims hard to believe. Because my maker didn't give a single fuck about my survival, she snarled. She just wanted Tezca dead, and if I had to die to fulfill my mission, then so be it. Right after crafting me, that bitch handed me to a sucker and sent me traveling Magur to look for Tezca while she waited in the safety of her lab. She programmed me to fight to the death so that she could reap the fruits of my labor. I was expendable since day one, so I followed her orders in the most roundabout way possible and waited for her to die. Once that happened, I was finally free. I stopped looking for Tezca because I had nothing to gain from our fight, and because I knew that even my maker's death didn't erase the core lines of my programming. As for my aces in the hole, I'm forbidden from using them against anyone but Tezca. My maker believed that if I exposed my best abilities, Tezca would have the opportunity to study and prepare against them. As I said, that bitch didn't care about how many times I was defeated or what happened to me as long as I performed my mission. Because of my programming, I couldn't use my true power even when I went this close to being destroyed. Salanoth glared at them both. Well, Tezca is right in front of us and your programming won't help you, but we can. Either you explain how you are supposed to kill Tezca to us, or we bail. Your choice. Jorl's heart bled at the idea of losing such a powerful ally, but the Ring of Space wasn't worth his life. If Salanoth died, Jorl's chances of becoming the new Upper King plummeted, but if he died, they would drop to 0. The keystone to our victory is a magical formation called Severed Sky. Salanoth sighed. The moment Tezca appeared, I shot several spirit and dimensional devices out of my pocket dimension and embedded them into the armory's walls, floor, and ceiling. They form an invisible barrier that seals all kinds of dimensional magic that, on my command, can stop all dimensional spells that go in or out of the barrier. Also, it allows me to compress the space around Tezca. As long as we keep him inside the Severed Sky array, dimensional magic won't work for him. Without it, he's just an eldritch, but still one of the most powerful eldritches on Magur. Moreover, my devices and arrays date back to the day I was created. I was supposed to fight Tezca while he was still an eldritch, not whatever he has become. If on top of a living body he has also picked up new skills during all this time, I'm not sure I can defeat him alone anymore. I need your help. The Ring of Space then shared the rest of her secret weapons with them. That's quite a lot of preparation for someone who claims she never wanted to fight against Tezca, Acton pondered. I don't want to, you moron, she replied. Yet I knew that if we ever met, I wouldn't be able to run away. I collected every bit of information I could find about him to counter his most famous abilities. As you can see, all that effort was worth it. Indeed, Jorl placed a hand on the shoulders of his 3 remaining teammates and gave them 1/5 of the life maelstrom he had left. 1/5 he used on himself, and the last one he kept for later. Well, this is weird. Tezca had stopped using Morning Rain and Unbreakable Bond before they put too much strain on his equipment. There is no array left standing, and I can feel my Sun Eater spell is still active, yet it remains beyond my grasp. What did you do to me, kid? I'll tell you to your grave. Salanoth bolted towards Tezca from the front while Jorl came at him from above, and Uriger and Acton flanked the Sun Eater. The cursed ring focused the silver lightning coursing through both her real body and her host into the captured world enchantment, spreading a vivid purple aura around her for over 100 meters, 330. Suddenly, the entire Magus seemed to come to a halt. Tezca's flying spell, the motes of dust in the air, the debris falling from the ceiling, everything was frozen in time like a picture captured by a high-end communication amulet. Freya told me the truth. This is exactly what I've sought for millennia. The Sun Eater could still feel the mana flowing through his limbs, and the fur on his body tremble ever so slightly as he moved through the air by a fraction of a millimeter. Nobody can stop time, but you can still stop motion if you combine gravity and dimensional magic properly. The Ring of Space has barely mastered the basics of it, even with forbidden magic, but it's still better than what I got. Nothing. Tezca would have loved to take his time and examine captured world thoroughly, but Salanoth had different plans. Uriger had conjured 2 source magic spells, Ripper Fire and Shadow Hunt, before stepping inside captured world. The stasis field couldn't stop time, only slow things down, so the spells had already fully formed and were slowly approaching their mark. Jorl and Acton moved even slower, but they didn't mind. The spells were meant to create an opening that the 2 divine beasts would exploit by releasing the thunder solace that they kept accumulating in their bodies with each delayed second. Salanoth recalled captured world as fast as she had conjured it, freeing her allies first. They had been frozen in time while at the fringes of the enchantment, whereas the Sun Eater and the Cursed Ring were at the heart of it. Ripper Fire used fire and earth magic to conjure spires of magma that air magic turned into high-speed drills, and water magic could cool them down at any moment. By adjusting the temperature of Ripper Fire, Uriger could turn the magma into solid rock or 1,000-degree hot spray in a split second. The spell's greatest strength lay in its ability to capture its prey and alter its density as needed. Shadow Hunt, instead, broke down the debris of the buildings into fine grains of dust that darkness magic filled to the brim. Air magic carried them around in a black mist that sealed both regular sight and mystical senses. Whoever fell into Shadow Hunt's embrace would lose their sense of direction and slam against the ground, and any obstacle around them as the spell drained their life. I don't like praising a meat sack, but that Tynan Zavra was a true genius, Uriger thought. Source magic was a complex and demanding subject for a regular mage, but soft clay in the hands of the Book of Knowledge. He had no need to conjure the Tier 5 spells, disassemble their runes on the spot, and then reassemble them in a new form. Chapter 4342, Dimensional Magic's Apex, Part 2. Uriger could do everything in the safety of his lab and record the final result in his pages, ready to be conjured at a moment's notice. The Cursed Book had spent countless hours revising the diaries of the lost Magus and improving his craft beyond Zavra's wildest dreams. Once a source spell was inscribed in his page, Uriger could study its effects just by looking at the strings of runes and alter the parts he found lacking. The only weak point of source magic was that it required performing many complex calculations and consumed lots of mana in the middle of battle. The Book of Knowledge had no such problems. He performed his spells with no rush and stored them in his page's days before a fight actually took place. Spells that Zavra could only hope to achieve through practice, luck, and intuition were a walk in the park for Uriger. The Book of Knowledge loved source magic so much that he was grateful to Orpal for sharing it with him, and almost regretted repaying the dead king's priceless gift with betrayal. Almost. Tezca turned around, conjuring 2 Tier 5 chaos spells, Void Hunger, from the maw and releasing them from his hands. He knew little about source magic, but he was certain that Uriger's spells would pose no threat to him after chaos devoured them. He was right, but he never got the opportunity to put his theory to the test. Salanoth pushed her pseudo-cores and host's mana core to their limit, mixing the upper woman's spirit magic with Salanoth's dimensional enchantments. Dozens of steps opened around the Filgja, and a mystical blade of purple energy appeared in Salanoth's hands as she charged forward. "Isn't that Night Maze?" Tezca thought in mild surprise. Foolish of her to use it against me. That is my spell. I created it and understand how it works better than anyone else. Night Maze was one of the crown jewels of Tezca's endless night blade, and had only one weakness. Even though Night Maze could conjure over 100 warp steps at the same time, they all led to the same dimensional crossroad. Tezca waited for Uriger's spells, Salanoth, Acton, and Jorl to enter the nearest steps before shooting his void hunger. Contrary to his expectations, the chaos spells emerged from another dimensional door aimed at him without hitting any of their targets. To make matters worse, the passage inside the dimensional space had distorted Tezca's energy signature, and void hunger could now hurt him. Oh shit! The Sun Eater moved out of the spell's trajectory just to run into Salanoth. Her purple blade cut through Tezca's Davros's armor, flesh, and bones like paper, reaching halfway through his ribcage. Ripper Fire came next. Multiple magma drills hit Tezca's back and sent him crashing into the ground. As he sank in the rising pool of magma, Shadow Hunt entered his open wound. Darkness ravaged the Sun Eater from the inside, turning into chaos as the Eldritch's body absorbed the spark of light element it contained. Tezca screamed in pain and outrage, aware that his greatest strength had just been turned against him. Before he could complete his defensive spell, Shadow Hunt and Ripper Fire opened like a curtain. Jorl and Acton rammed into the Sun Eater at sonic speed from opposite sides, hitting him in a whirlwind of mace blows and spear thrusts. Each strike unleashed the thunder soul that the two uppers had accumulated. Tezca coughed up a mouthful of blood, his bones breaking and his internal organs collapsing one after another under the relentless blows of the two divine beasts. Without the Sun Eater spell, the mass gap made Tezca's skill useless against much bigger opponents. The charge of the two divine beasts stopped only once they sent Tezca slamming into the armory's orichalcum wall. Jorl and Acton didn't let go of the Filgja out of the goodness of their hearts, but because the Chaos Dimension spell that Tezca conjured left them no choice. Ripper Fire and Shadow Hunt circled the dimensional field, unable to pinpoint the Sun Eater's position, and the corrupted lightning bolts of Thunder Soul dispersed in the air the moment they emerged from the Storm Griffin's maces and the Bastit's spear. Jorl had fought Eldritches in the past and knew that sticking to close-quarter combat against them without a solid plan was suicidal at best. Without the cover of his allies and the internal damage inflicted by Thunder Soul, he retreated to a safe distance. I can't believe it, Acton thought as he followed the Storm Griffin's lead. I'm a bright violet-cored divine beast, full to the brim with life maelstrom, yet I barely put a dent in that monster. The wounds on Tezca's body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. While his damaged equipment had fully repaired itself, the moment Chaos Dimension had enveloped its master. Even worse, the Sun Eater didn't show any sign of fear or anger, only surprise. I'm done with this charade, kid, Tezca snarled. Tell me who you are and who created you. And why should I, old fox? Salanoth laughed. Following her original programming gave her endless joy, and seeing the fabled Tezca bleed filled her with confidence. The fear of meeting him that had haunted them for all those millennia cleared like mist under the morning sun. Besides, you aren't stupid, she chuckled. Do you really need me to say what you already know out loud? You are holding my infinity blade, and earlier you conjured my infinity gate, Tezca snarled. Nobody outside the Summoner clan ever saw those spells and lived to tell the tale. Your maker is one of my people. She was one of your people. The eyes of Salanoth's host burned with emerald light as she activated the second effect of her severed sky array. And not just anyone, old fox. Your great-great-granddaughter crafted me to kill you. Your entire tribe hated you so much that they gave up on their lives to put an end to yours. Tezca jumped toward the ring of space, and she blinked her allies at a safe distance before activating the captured world enchantments again. The purple aura clashed with the energy sphere of Chaos Dimension, slowly but steadily suppressing it. What is this? What are you doing to me? The Sun Eater could speak, move, and conjure spells while under the protection of Chaos Dimension, but everything would stop once it left the spell's boundaries, and he was in no rush to fall into another trap. This is the work you failed to complete before your demise, old fox, Salanoth said after dispelling captured world. You perfected infinity, the apex of dimensional magic, but I have also mastered gravity magic and discovered eternity. At a wave of her hand, the spirit and dimensional artifacts that she had scattered across Teneb's armory formed a colossal magical formation that merged with the ring of space, becoming an extension of her pseudo-cores. The network of artifacts amplified her mana by several folds, turning captured world into eternity seal. Salanoth's purple aura spread throughout the cave, affecting everyone whom Salanoth hadn't marked as an ally. Lith, Morok, and Tista reacted by activating Swirling Wind, but Eternity Seal exerted such pressure that the evolved humans could barely protect themselves. Keeping their friends from being turned into mush took everything the evolved humans got, and then more. Chapter 4343 Salanoth's Pride, Part 1. Salanoth glanced at Lith's group for a moment as she prepared for her final blow. Her real target was Tezca, but she couldn't afford any unknown variable to interfere with her plan. How in Maugur's name are they still alive? She thought. Being enveloped by my Eternity Seal spell should be enough to crush those ants. I would kill them where they stand if suppressing Tezca didn't take all the power my human and Davros vessels can endure. Do you want one of us to disengage and take them out? Acton asked. Don't be a fool, Jorl replied. If you get too close and one of the demons hits you with that black fire, you'll lose your life maelstrom and then your life. Also, we are winning only because of our teamwork, Uriger pointed out. Without you, Acton, there is no mana aura. Jorl would die after one hit, and Salanoth's host wouldn't be able to channel so much mana. Leave Verhen and his lackeys be, the Ring of Space inwardly cursed. We'll deal with them after Tezca is dead. The bastard is much stronger than any rumor I've ever heard about him claimed. I need all of you. Salanoth called upon the silver lightning coursing through her body, and the mana body to conjure an Eternity Seal stronger than her maker's enchantments alone would allow her to. A powerful gravity field formed around Tezca's chaos dimension, increasing the Filgja's weight by 1,000-fold and changing its gravitational acceleration's direction hundreds of times per second. The effects of the Eternity Seal were focused and amplified by an external dimensional field that coated the internal gravity field conjured by the spell, allowing it to neutralize the chaos dimension. The pressure generated by the Eternity Seal crushed Tezca's chaos dimension and hit the Filgja like an avalanche. The Filgja's body was suddenly pulled and pushed in all directions at once. His every attempt to move was resisted by an unstoppable force that wrapped itself around him like a second skin, while leaving the uppers free to move. With me, Salanoth roared in savage joy as she shapeshifted into an upper 5 meters, 17, tall, and her infinity blade grew to match her size. She had spent millennia in a humanoid body and mastered all forms of combat with it, whereas she had acquired her upper form for less than a year. The cursed ring kept her size small enough to retain most of her combat skills and big enough to cut Tezca with a single swing of her dimensional weapon. Uriger followed her example and conjured multiple spells from his pages. 3 life maelstrom-infused griffin fetters to restrain Tezca and 1 dark mastery to finish him off. Acton charged his spear, Ashen Dread, with silver lightning to boost its enchantments as he swooped down on the helpless Filgja. The bastard also breathed a full burst of origin flames that phased through the Eternity Seal, eating at Tezca's mana, equipment, and flesh. As for Jorl, there was already too much magic at play, of which he understood nothing. Most of Tezca's and Salanoth's spells made no sense to him, and the more he saw, the more he doubted the Ring of Space needed him for more than his life maelstrom. The Storm Griffin limited himself to following the script Salanoth had prepared for him and Acton, pushing his focus point bloodline ability to the extreme. Every hit of Dusk Wraith would carry the might of Jorl's entire body and inject enough Thunder Soul to kill a divine beast. Tezca tensed his muscles like bowstrings, but aside from his veins rupturing from the strain and his Sun Eater armor collapsing under its own weight, he achieved nothing. The gravity field distorted and twisted even his mana, while dimensional magic formed an inescapable cage around him. The finesse and techniques he had mastered over the millennia were useless against Salanoth's Eternity Seal. Only a spell of comparable or greater might could defeat it. Tezca released the power stored in his 10th tail, conjuring the array for the Chaos Annihilation. The Anti-Guardian spell tore through gravity and space, while the Chaos element that replaced darkness disrupted the delicate hepta-elemental balance that the Eternity Gate required. The Sun Eater couldn't afford to aim the Chaos Annihilation at any of his enemies. Unlike him, they were free to blink, and every second spent chasing after them would weaken the Anti-Guardian spell. Even worse, without Chaos Annihilation's interference, Salanoth would restore the Eternity Seal before Tezca found a way to counter it. Time had become a priceless currency, and Tezca spent what little he had left wisely. I can't open either my dimensional or gravity tail, the Sun Eater inwardly cursed. which leaves me with only 4 spells that the cursed ring might turn against me. I need to kill or incapacitate her helpers. Without them, she can paralyze me, but she can't kill me. He sent the anti-guardian spell flying across the cave, tearing apart the nodes of the severed sky array and severing the mana lines that connected it to Salanoth. Nothing stopped his enemies from attacking him, but until Chaos Annihilation disappeared, Tezca was also free to move and fight back. He sent one of his tails after each one of the Griffin Fetters and a Tier 4 Chaos spell, Void Hollow, against Dark Mastery. The Chaos Pillar pierced through the darkness constructs and then Uriger's chest. The gaping hole would soon heal, but without lungs, the human host couldn't use his breathing technique, and without mana, the Book of Knowledge was nothing but a fancy paperweight. The 3 tails released a burst of cinder, corruption, and decay that pulverized the Griffin Fetters and hit the Cursed Book with enough strength to tear a few of his Davros pages into shreds. When Jorl arrived, Tezca didn't waste a single spell on him. The Sun Eater performed 2 side swings of Endless Night, swatting the adamant maces away before performing a lightning-fast lunge. The counter struck Jorl square in the chest, turning the strength of his charge against him and impaling the Storm Griffin on the Davros blade. The best enchantments of the Black Throne and the Spirit Barrier failed to stop Endless Night from punching a hole through Jorl's chest. The chaos flowing through the blade withered the Storm Griffin's muscles surrounding the gaping wound and dried up the blood, causing his organs to fail. The healing enchantments of the Starpath armor neutralized the chaos and reverted it into darkness, but that only spread the damage further. Salanoth arrived a heartbeat later, so Tezca had no time to deliver the finishing blow. He turned around just in time to raise Endless Night and block the Infinity Blade aimed at his neck. Fool, your Davros blade can easily repair from such a clean cut, whereas you, the Ring of Space's smile disappeared when the metal of Endless Night and the dimensional energy of her Infinity Blade clashed to a standstill. Fool, Tezca's snout curled up into a cruel smirk. That's my spell. Did you really think I don't know it inside out? Salanoth threw the set of adamant chains she had used to ensnare Lith, Snakebite, at Tezca, while Tezca kicked her with enough strength to send her crashing into the wall on the opposite side of the cave. Chapter 4344 Salanoth's Pride, Part 2. Snakebite was heavy and large enough to trap a divine beast. Against someone as small as Tezca, it compressed its size and mass, becoming several times stronger. The Filgja tapped into unbreakable bond again, shredding the chain like paper. Meanwhile, Jorl refused to die, and his strong will activated the silver flame orbiting his head. Light Soul quickly filled the hole in his chest with a sickening silver radiance that was soon replaced by new flesh and blood. A Vertilax flesh and blood. Light Soul hadn't healed Jorl's wound so much as devoured part of his Griffin life force. The process was excruciatingly painful, and with each shred of flesh that grew, Jorl felt a part of him die. Guys, we are barely holding out, Tista said via the mind link. Either you find a way to help us or this is going to end badly. She, Lith, and Morok were doing their best to repel the effects of the Eternity Seal, but using swirling wind like that consumed so much mana that they had already used Invigoration several times. The others had already tried everything, but Salanoth's severed sky formation sealed all kinds of dimensional magic. Without her consent, the space-compressing arrays made it impossible to warp out of the armory. The evolved human swirling wind allowed them to blink, but only within the area of effect of their bloodline ability. Just tell us what to do, and we'll do it. Nalrund had already conjured several hard light barriers, but they crumbled the moment they moved past swirling wind's thin protective layer. Is there a way for any of you to conjure some vital storm and send it to Tezca? Quilla asked. That might make him strong enough to resist the Cursed Ring's spell, or at least kill one of the uppers. Are you kidding me? Lith, Tista, and Morok grunted in effort. I'm using all I have on myself, and it's barely enough. Even if I had something left to spare, Tezca is too far and the fight is too chaotic. It's like shooting blind and hoping to hit a coin tossed in the air. They are right. Solus looked at her wings as if they had betrayed her. If only I knew how to use my human side, I could at least share part of the burden. You can't, but we can, the Sage Staff said. Me protect, me help. The artifact stopped absorbing the world energy through its 6 Balor eyes and started emitting the elemental power stored in its crystals and power core. The 6 eyes released a thin mist that merged with the swirling wind, strengthening it. Please, Staff, explain to me what you are doing, Solus said. I want to help. In from the gems out of the eyes. the sage staff replied, sharing its technique with Solus down to the smallest detail. It's in from the wings, out of the eyes for me, but I get it now. Maybe. Solus did her best, channeling more and more world energy through her wings as her atrophied mana organs swelled. It wasn't much at first, but soon she and her staff were able to conjure another swirling wind's worth of protective layer. Much better, Lith sighed in relief and turned to Nalrond. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad you had the Summoner Stone with you. My question is, what did you promise Tezca in exchange for his help, and why didn't you tell us? After we fought the Cursed Ring, Freya was both fascinated and scared by its abilities, Nalrond explained. She feared it was an opponent far out of our league and hoped that Tezca would share her interest in the matter. She was right. When Freya told him about the Cursed Ring's paralyzing skill, Tezca struck a deal with her. He would deal with the Cursed Ring for us and study its enchantments as he did it. As for your second question, we didn't tell you because it's none of your business, and because we know how you think, Lith. You don't trust the organization and would have never let us do anything that might make someone as powerful as Tezca even more powerful. And you were right, Lith grunted. I should be angry with both you and Freya, but since you saved our lives, that would be stupid of me. Just answer me this. Did Freya strike a deal with Tezca for our sake or her own? Her own, the Agni replied. In case you are wondering, she didn't do it to learn the secret of the dimensional crystals. That's something she cares about, but not something Freya would stake her life on. She did it for Gianni. Fuck me sideways, how could I have been so blind? Lith's 7 eyes widened in understanding. Tezca promised to help her fight against the Jernoffs, am I right? He promised that he'll fight beside her once. Nalrund nodded. Freya believes that's all Gianni needs to win, someone powerful enough to cut the Jernoffs' retreat path and end the conflict in one fell swoop. We'll talk about the potential ramifications of Freya's deal later, Menadian said. Now we have to find a way out of here. If Tezca loses, we'll die next. This is impossible, Salanoth roared as she emerged from the debris in which she was buried. You can't use the Infinity Blade spell. It requires spirit magic to work, and you are an eldritch. You should have lost the ability to use spirit magic the day you died. There is no record of a single fight where you used spirit or infinity magic. She restored her connection to the severed sky array, and a new massive gravity field formed around Tezca. Yet he didn't move from his spot, and when Eternity Gate trapped him again, he conjured a second chaos dimension. The dimensional bubble failed to reach its full size due to the pressure of the Eternity Gate, but this time it shrank slowly. Salanoth's array had to fight hard and drain lots of the mana stored in her dimensional devices to advance by a single centimeter. Gods, my death must have hit my clan way worse than I thought. Tezca's and the Cursed Ring's swords clashed again, revealing a thin dimensional blade coating endless night. Infinity magic is the apex of dimensional magic, and dimensional magic is a force of nature. There is no spirit magic in the world energy, so infinity magic has no use for it. The spell you are so proud of is the practice version of the real deal. Spirit magic is meant as a crutch for beginners. A tool that easily obeys their will, and allows them to get a feel for infinity magic until they master the 6 elements and no longer need spirit magic's aid. You mistook the rest area for the destination, kid. And the funniest thing is that despite its fancy name, the Infinity Blade is not a weapon. It's a teaching spell. To further prove his point, Tezca conjured an Infinity Blade in his left hand. Its edges were much more defined, and its ever-shifting colors more vibrant than Salanoth's spell, and carried no shade of green. Much to everyone's surprise, the perfect Infinity Blade collapsed the moment the Sun Eater used it to lunge at the Cursed Ring, and the dimensional blade left the confines of Chaos Dimension. Chapter 43-45 Tezca's Answer, Part 1. This wasn't part of our deal, boy, so consider the lesson my congratulatory gift for your twins. Watch and listen well, because Freya is going to need it. Tezca turned his head just enough to look at Nalrond. As for you, kid, I'm not as stingy with words as you are. I'm more than happy to help my enemies understand the depth of their incompetence before I kill them. His polite and professional tone was that of an academy professor, but his cruel smile was that of a predator playing with his quarry. I call the apex of dimensional magic infinity because there's nowhere it can't reach. Once you learn how to stabilize the volatile and fickle dimensional energies with gravity, the possibilities are endless. Tezca formed a thin warp steps within the boundaries of Chaos Dimension, and then conjured a gravity spell that coated it like a second layer. The different energies quickly merged into a single spell, allowing the rift to move around without collapsing or needing to alter its dimensional coordinates. The Infinity Blade is the basic exercise to learn infinity magic. If you can't control what you hold in your very hand, how can you hope to master the space that's hundreds, if not thousands of meters away? It's never been intended to be used as a weapon, and if you truly understood infinity magic, you would have realized it without my help, kid. Tezca shook his head. What good is a blade that opens wounds as thin as a hair? Magic metals self-repair as soon as you pull away the Infinity Blade, and healing the injuries it causes takes little skill and effort. The edges of the wound are so perfect that even severed limbs are as good as new as soon as you reattach them. Not to mention plant folk, mage slayers, hordes, undead, and all those creatures that would not even notice such a thin cut or make a meal out of the Infinity Blade. And don't get me started on anything the size of a lesser divine beast or bigger. To them, the Infinity Blade is but a toothpick, and making it big enough to hurt them requires so much mana and skill that you might as well cast 100 Tier 5 spells. Last but not least, infinity magic is unsuited for closed spaces and can't be used in the presence of any kind of dimensional array. Tezca put the blade outside the chaos dimension, and it faded into nothingness. The balance between gravity and dimensional magic is so delicate that even the spells of an amateur like you can distort the infinity blade of a master like me. There are only two solutions to this problem. 1. The violet crystal on Endless Night collected the energy of the other 6 elemental crystals, forming a dimensional rift along its blade. Why is the Sun Eater wasting so much time talking? Uriger had already regenerated his host and was now recovering his strength with invigoration. Is he trying to catch his breath, or is it because he can't afford to move from the safety of that spot? It's neither, Jorl grunted, feeling sick as he studied the changes in his life force. The Sun Eater is playing with us. He considers the fight to be already over. We are not his enemies. Then what do we do? Uriger swapped the spells recorded in his pages with those he believed would increase his chances of survival. The only thing we can, Jorl replied. We help Salanoth to the best of our abilities until we find an opening to get the fuck out of here. I'm not dying like a moron for a millennia-old grudge that has nothing to do with me. Forge Mastering allows you to skip all the complexities of conjuring infinity magic, while Davros makes a perfect shell to isolate such delicate spells from external influences, making them akin to fusion magic. Tezca swung Endless Night, and the Infinity Blade coating it was unaffected by the severed sky array. 2. Tezca conjured another dimensional weapon in his left hand, but this time its outline was so black that it seemed to devour all light. Replacing darkness with chaos stabilizes infinity magic and greatly improves its killing potential. Chaos devours everything it touches long before it can disturb the balance of the Infinity Blade, and the wounds it inflicts are far from clean. The Chaos Blade resisted severed sky as well and cut through the Eternity Seal, forcing Salanoth to spend mana to repair it. Chaos is the answer I found to infinity magic's weakness after I was reborn. Chaos is the reason I'm still alive to this day, and the secret behind Chaos Dimension, girl, Tezca said, as he let the Chaos Dimension that protected him fade. The Ring of Space didn't miss the opening and focused her power into a new Eternity Gate, stronger and deadlier than the previous. The Sun Eater didn't move, waiting until the last second before revealing his hand. The Chaos Blade he held grew and expanded in every direction, forming a perfect sphere centered on Tezca that the eyes of Menadian identified as something similar to Chaos Dimension, yet different. Salanoth's magical formation and Tezca's new spell fought once again, yet this time Chaos Dimension held its ground. The clashing of the two spells produced sparks across the borders of the dimensional energy sphere and the screech of metal against metal. The Ring of Space gave her all into the attack, pouring all the skill she had accumulated over the millennia, and the power she had infused into the spirit and dimensional devices scattered across the armory's ruins. Chaos Dimension flickered a few times, even shrinking by a few centimeters when the attack reached its apex, but it always bounced back. After a while, Salanoth had to stop her onslaught to let her host use invigoration. Much to her horror, Tezca showed no signs of exhaustion and had conjured another dimensional rift in his hand. Eternity magic was my greatest regret, boy, the Sun Eater sighed. If gravity can support space to allow me to reach anywhere I want, then by using space to support gravity, I was supposed to be able to control motion. I called this theoretical branch of magic eternity because it allows its user to freeze or accelerate anything you want. It's not real control over the flow of time, but it doesn't threaten the fabric of reality and requires much less power. I've tried to use dimensional magic to restrict the area of effect of gravity magic, and focus its power on my enemies without affecting me since I was still a living Filgja, but I always failed. I could always conjure a dimensional array to seal a gravity spell, sure, but once I stepped inside the array, I would suffer the effects of gravity magic like everyone else. That kind of farce couldn't be called eternity magic, Tezca snarled. I would ask you how your maker could succeed where I failed, considering their very limited talent, but the answer is painfully obvious, girl. They used forbidden magic. Salanoth swallowed hard, afraid of how quickly Tezca had figured out the secret of her strength, and even found a way to counter it. Chapter 4346 Tezca's Answer, Part 2. That idiot must have used forbidden magic to clumsily crawl into the domain of infinity magic. Then, they used what they learned from their experiments to create you and cheat their way into eternity magic. Your maker did a poor job at both. You need spirit magic to conjure the simplest of infinity magic spells, and an entire magical formation fueled by spirit artifacts to produce something that barely scratches the surface of eternity magic. I'm ashamed that someone from my summoner clan could have achieved so little despite the rich legacy I left behind and stooped low enough to use forbidden magic, but credit where credit is due. Your maker may not have understood the first thing about eternity magic, kid, but they did reach farther than I ever did. If not for that incompetent fool, you wouldn't have been born nor entrusted with the means to teach me a priceless lesson. Tezca paused to let his words sink in. Your maker took the wrong and easy path to achieve eternity magic, and by studying their success, I was finally able to figure out what I've been doing wrong for all this time. Tezca dispelled the third iteration of Chaos Dimension. For that, you and your maker have my thanks, kid. The dimensional rift in the Sun Eater's left hand expanded into something that incorporated both Tezca's mastery over infinity magic and his newfound grasp on eternity magic. The Eternity Seal array pressed on Tezca's new spell like a rising tide, but the spell stood unflinching like a mountain. The Chaos Dimension kept growing and expanding, no matter how much energy Salanoth drew from her spirit devices, stopping only when it reached the limits of the Filgja's current strength. Allow me to show you how eternity magic is truly done as a parting gift, child. Tezca jumped at the ring of space, and this time the Eternity Seal failed to restrict his movements or suppress the power of the Chaos Dimension. Salanoth's forbidden magical formation retreated in front of the Chaos spell with the tenacity of a beaten soldier trying to save their life without offering their back to the enemy. If Tezca comes too close, I have 2 seconds tops before Chaos Dimension envelops me. If that happens, the severed sky array will crumble, and the Sun Eater spell will flood him with power. Curse you and your obsession with surpassing your ancestor, Terja. You wasted your life chasing after Tezca, and now I might end up the same way because of you. The cursed ring released all the wands she had stored in her pocket dimension, and fired them in unison until they had no charge left. The light of the hundreds of elemental spells they released would have dwarfed the sun, and the noise they produced made the entire cave tremble. Yet not one bolt of ice, fire, lightning, or darkness entered the space encompassed by Chaos Dimension. The spells were all captured by Chaos Dimension's gravitational pull and thrown back at Salanoth after half an orbit around the Sun Eater. The alchemical tools fought against themselves, saving Tezca the little mana he had left to win that fight. The Sun Eater's confident act was all a ruse to hide his weakness, and by the time that the Endless Night blade needed to recharge his equipment. Away from a mana geyser, and with no invigoration, Tezca relied on his Sun Eater spell to make up for the limits of his eldritch nature. He had come to Nalron's rescue knowing the risks, and with a vague idea of the identity of his mark, but Salanoth's prowess had far exceeded his most grim expectations. The severed sky formation had deprived him of his best card, and the armory's dimensional ceiling and space-compressing arrays had pushed him far back into a corner. His blade's spell, Unbreakable Bond, had allowed him to contain the threat of the uppers while he tried to figure out his path to victory, but it was no winning move. The special runes of Endless Night allowed it to quickly absorb the world energy, but they were unsuitable for most pieces of his equipment like the skull or the maw. To make matters worse, draining the power from an artifact for too long would decrease the durability of the Davros until it was given enough time to recover. With each spell Tezca cast, his equipment became more brittle, and its enchantments weakened. When Salanoth had revealed her ability to use both infinity and eternity magic, the Sun Eater had wondered his odds of victory for the first time in a very long while. Chaos Dimension was supposed to be his unbreakable bastion. A mobile fortress that, when fueled by the Sun Eater spell, could bring him close to the level of a guardian. Yet Severed Sky had defeated it as well, and Eternity Gate had turned Tezca into a multi-tailed fish in a barrel. If not for his warg power to parallel think like 10 people, the constant data flow and the mental focusing ability of the skull, the high casting speed of the Maw of Baitra, and his recent breakthrough, Salanoth's preparations would have spelled his death. When I get back home, I must thank Zagar and Baitra. This victory belongs to them as much as me, the Sun Eater thought while sharpening his mind into the deadliest blade. His eyes darted left and right, expecting an enemy or a deadly spell to jump out of the dust cloud raised by the countless detonations. He listened carefully to the skull's data flow, ready to counter any new trick that the Severed Sky array might still hide. Now, Salanoth ordered via the mind link, and her allies delivered. The adamant chain, Snakebite, was whole again, and it wasn't alone. Swords, polearms, knives, maces, and all sorts of powerful enchanted weapons that the Ring of Space had collected during her long life came at Tezca like a metal swarm. Salanoth had mastered all of them, and each weapon moved as if she were wielding it instead of being manipulated by her dimensional field. The Ring of Space kept her distance, using the Severed Sky array as both a shield for his allies and a sword pointed at Tezca's neck. The pressure that Eternity Seal exerted on Chaos Dimension could no longer stop the Filgja's advance, but it slowed him down. Moreover, her allies were free to blink across the battlefield while he couldn't step outside his spell without being nailed to the ground like an insect. Salanoth could have even allowed Jorl and Uriger to use warp steps, but she didn't trust them to fight by her side to the bitter end unless they had to. Useless to say, she was right. The only reason Jorl shared most of the life maelstrom he had left with her was that he was afraid of what would happen if Salanoth died, and the power of the Sun Eater's spell flooded Tezca again. Uriger conjured his best spirit and source magic spells, holding nothing back, only because he was much more afraid of the Sun Eater than he was of the idea that one of his so-called allies could steal his secrets. Acton the Bastetupper was the only one among them who helped the Ring of Space out of his will to fight rather than fear. Chapter 43-47 Falling Apart, Part 1. Dethroning Orpal and helping Jorl to establish his kingdom of uppers was but a stepping stone for Acton. His final goal was to put an end to the territorial wars in Verendi and unify the continent under his banner. Yet Acton knew that the Master's organization, the current shadow ruler of Verendi, wouldn't let him put it out of business without a fight. The organization barely acknowledged Acton's existence, but to him, they were sworn enemies. The Bastetupper had never forgiven the organization for capturing and experimenting on his mother, Ilza, and for profiting off the wars that the people of Verendi waged against each other. Sooner or later, the organization and I will have to fight, and only one of us will come out of the conflict alive, he thought. Tezca is a core member of the Master's organization and its strongest member. If today we kill him, getting rid of the rest of the Master's hybrids and freeing Verendi from their clutches tomorrow will be much easier. If we fail, we'll still learn a lot about Tezca's abilities and how to defeat him. The outcome of this battle doesn't matter. As long as we survive, this will be our victory, Acton thought, his mind filled with dreams of revenge and future glory. Salanoth's swarm of magical weapons attacked Tezca from the front to cloud his vision, while Uriger's spells came from above, and Jorl and Acton flanked the Sun Eater. The three uppers attacked in unison, striking at the same moment as the swarm, so as not to give the Filgja time to react. Tezca exhaled slowly, waving his hands in a circle as he planted his feet and widened his stance. A flick of the Sun Eater's right wrist opened a large zero warp before the incoming metal swarm, while the splaying of the fingers of his left hand conjured 2 exit points beside him. As the flying weapons crossed through the blue spinning vortex, the zero element stripped them of heat at the molecular level. Their enchantment stopped working, and Chaos Dimension severed their link with Salanoth, turning the remote-controlled blades into a mindless avalanche. Tezca split the torrent of frozen weapons in 2 and aimed them at the Storm Griffin and the Bastet. The cursed ice element had sealed the artifact's magical powers, but adamant was still adamant, and Zero coated the entire length of the weapons. Acton and Jorl were forced to slow down, focusing on defense to destroy and deflect what they couldn't avoid. The razor-sharp layer of cursed ice made the frozen artifacts dangerous from tip to pommel, but that was only part of the problem. I trust the Black Throne's skill in crafting my Starpath armor, Jorel thought as he fought with the fury of a living storm. What I'm afraid of is what that kind of cold will do to me if even one of those weapons gets stuck in my body. His Dusk Wraith maces destroyed dozens of frozen artifacts with each swing, producing the silvery sound of a spoon tapping a crystal flute. Alas, they also made their master's worst fears come true. The frozen weapons shattered on impact into hundreds of adamant fragments, and the zero element they were imbued with allowed them to pierce through the gravity sheath of the Starpath armor. The smaller the adamant shard, the sharper it was, and the deeper it dug through Jorel's black hide. The invading zero element reacted like a hungry beast, robbing the storm griffin of his body heat and turning him into a shivering mess. Jorel's movements and maces became too slow to keep up with the onslaught, as the frozen avalanche kept pouring out of the zero gate. On Tezca's left side, Acton made the mistake of hurling a river of origin flames. The first wave of weapons thawed as he intended, but they were already too close to him for Salanoth to regain control, and their power cores struck him with their full might. The now working artifacts didn't shatter against his spear, but they unleashed the fiery explosions, nets of lightning bolts, darkness mist, ice blades, and mud bindings that the Ring of Space had intended for Tezc upon the upper bastet. On the one hand, the single burst of origin flame had cleansed the zero element only from a handful of weapons, and with Acton's size and mass, he only suffered a few shallow wounds. On the other hand, the flashes of light and the mana released by the weapon's enchantments blinded Acton's life vision and overloaded his full guard. The Bastet failed to defend himself from the following waves of frozen weapons, ending up like Jorel. At the same time, Tezca clapped his hands to conjure a corruption gate and its exit point side by side, right past the boundaries of Chaos Dimension. Uriger's spells fell into the entry point and came out of the corruption gate with a different energy signature. Not only were they now capable of hurting their caster, but their original earth element had been replaced by corruption after the dimensional gate had robbed it of the air element that kept the earth element stable. Oh shit! The Book of Knowledge's source magic spells hit him with the speed of sound and the destructive power of a cursed spell. They weren't strong enough to do more than tear his host to shreds, but until Uriger regenerated the human, his mana reserves were limited to what was stored in his white crystals. Don't give him time to recover. Salanoth took a deep breath of invigoration and called upon the power of the severed sky array. The Sun Eater is a candle out of wax. It takes but one decent blow to snuff his flame out. The Ring of Space inwardly thanked Teneb for building his base away from a mana geyser, the gods for the Eldritch's inability to use breathing technique, and her own maker, Terja, for preparing way more energy devices to sustain the severed sky array than Salanoth had ever thought necessary. If just one of these factors weren't in place, we would be dead already, she thought. I've fought and survived many Eldritches during my life, but none of them ever came close to Tezca's power. Whatever trick he used to regain his physical body made him more than an Eldritch should amount to. I've cut him off from his Sun Eater spell, and Jorel infused us with plenty of life maelstrom, yet even after taking so much damage, Tezca can still keep up with us. She released a large chunk of the power stored in the dimensional and spirit devices, fueling the severed sky array, and activated an eternity seal even stronger than before. Immense gravity pressed on Chaos Dimension from every side, locking Tezca into place like a trapped mouse. At the same time, the dimensional sheath that surrounded the eternity seal reflected the spell's gravitational force spreading outwards, doubling its destructive power. Chaos Dimension shrank further, covering barely 10 meters, 33, around the Sun Eater. He gritted his fangs but didn't lose control of his spell, not even when his nose, eyes, and ears started to bleed. To make matters worse, Jorel and Acton had already shrugged off the effects of the frozen metal shards. As soon as their body heat neutralized the little zero carried by the weapon's fragments, their self-repair enchantments rebuilt them. Chapter 43-48 Falling Apart, Part 2. The metal shards left the storm griffins and the Bastet's wounds the same way they had entered, dealing them no further damage and allowing them to resume their attack. Even whole, the weapons Salanoth had prepared were too small to be a real threat to someone the size of a divine beast. Without the zero element, they were flies to the uppers, and Tezca's trick had delayed them for barely a second. Yet that second was enough. With Uriger still out of commission and Salanoth too focused on fueling the Eternity Seal to do anything else, Tezca was free to deal with the divine beasts. He sheathed Endless Night and opened dozens of small cinder steps the moment Jorl and Akaton entered Chaos Dimension's range. The Sun Eater shifted his center of gravity, and gravity itself shifted with him. The two uppers' weight increased severalfold, breaking their stance and making them fall towards the cinder steps. Tezca threw a barrage of quick jabs that entered the cursed gates and emerged on the other side with their kinetic energy increased by 100-fold. The Sun Eater had the mass of an emperor beast, and his strength was spent, but a short burst of unbreakable bond accompanied each punch. The enchanted armor caved and shattered under Tezca's surgical strikes, and then the same happened to the tendons and muscles that supported the uppers' bodies. Darkness fusion kept Jorl and Akaton from feeling pain, but also from understanding why they collapsed to the ground like puppets whose strings had been cut. This chaos dimension may be as small as the first time I conjured it as a newborn abomination, but this is still my world. I make the rules in here. A second shift in his weight reversed the gravity, sending the two uppers to crash into the stalactites that dotted the cave's ceiling. I can't believe this, Lith thought. I was there when Tezca fought Grandma. His chaos dimension extended for over 100 meters, 330, and the eyes of Menadian failed to gauge his mana flow. Now chaos dimension covers only 1/10 of that, and Tezca's strength is but a fraction of what he had when he arrived here. It's as if I became as weak as Aaron, yet even though the uppers outnumber and outmatch him, they can't defeat him. We'll gape at his tactical skills later. Now focus. Soulless voice snapped Lith out of his daze. If Swirling Wind loses even one bit of its strength, Salanoth's Eternity Seal will squash us like bugs. Yeah, Morok nodded, taking regular, deep breaths to maintain invigoration. I can't believe that cursed bitch can kill us without even trying. We are experiencing solely the side effects of the severed sky array, yet we can barely hold on. If we let the gravity field bind us, we'll be paralyzed, and our defensive enchantments will stop working. Tista grunted with effort. At that point, one spell will be enough to kill us all. Come on, kid. It took Tezca everything he had to take one step forward. Let's see what happens first, me running out of mana or you dying by my hand. Tezca advanced by another step under Salanoth's terrified gaze. No, no, no. Her Davros body couldn't handle the strain from channeling the power of the severed sky array for so long, and conjuring the Eternity Gate array so many times had overloaded her pseudo-cores. Cracks formed along the surface of the cursed ring, and she didn't shatter only thanks to the self-repair abilities of the legendary metal from which she had been crafted. He should already be dead. I was supposed to need one Eternity Seal and one Infinity Blade to kill him once and for all. Why isn't it working? Why is he still alive? The cycles of falling apart and self-repairing degraded the Davros durability, making the cursed ring last less with every iteration. She released the Eternity Seal spell, hoping that the strength she had left and her allies would be enough to win. Lith and the others felt as if tons of rock had just been lifted off their heads, while for Tezca it was as if he had shrugged a planet off his back. Yet he too wasn't in great shape. Keeping Chaos Dimension active took a huge toll on him, but he knew that in his debilitated state and without the protection of his spell, he would be easy prey for the four uppers. He kept Chaos Dimension at his reduced size, not to consume more mana, and bolted forward with all the speed he could muster. Not so fast. Uriger's host took a deep breath of invigoration, and the Book of Knowledge conjured 3 Tier 5 spirit spells, Phoenix Smash. The emerald fire would burn at Chaos Dimension, and without it, the Sun Eater lacked the strength to be a threat. Right back at you. Tezca opened his water and earth tails, releasing a pillar of zero and another of corruption. The cursed ice struck the spirit spells while they were still taking form, turning them into fire-shaped ice sculptures. The cursed earth struck next, shattering the Phoenix Smashes into bits and altering their energy signature. Uriger found himself ablaze with the mystical fire of his own spirit magic that now didn't recognize him as its master, nor did it answer to his will. Tezca also conjured the Tier 4 Chaos spell, Morning Rain, to exploit the opening. The barrage of bolts of chaos tore Uriger's host to shreds and turned the Book of Knowledge into a Davros sieve, putting him out of commission again. It's just you and me now, kid, Tezca roared. Your severed sky array is a pain in my neck, but the silver lining is that it stops everyone else from casting arrays as well. Your big-ass magical formation takes so much space that there's not enough left for anything else. Salah al-Jorl tried to tell the Ring of Space that she needed to hold out only the time for him to take a few more breaths of invigoration, but talking was too much for his tortured body. Tezca's fists had crippled the storm griffin, and the bastet to the point that darkness fusion only kept them from losing consciousness. Moreover, the Sun-Eater's blows had shattered their bones, and the impact with the ceiling and the following fall had punctured their organs. The two divine beasts were as helpless as blind puppies, and would remain that way until they healed. "Stay back," Salanoth tried to conjure a new eternity seal, but weaving its first rune was enough to crack her real body and ruin her focus. "You have no idea what you are doing. There is too much at stake." "Now you want to talk?" Tezca said with cruel laughter. "Don't worry, I'm not one to hold a grudge, and I'm a sucker for a good story, especially a sob one. Enlighten me." Endless Night's elemental crystals flared, turning its edge into an infinity blade. Under normal circumstances, the Ring of Space would have scoffed at it, but things were anything but normal now. "One hit, all it takes him is one hit, and I'm screwed." Salanoth conjured an infinity blade of her own and desperately tried to block the rain of incoming blows. Chapter 4349 Prodigal Daughter, Part 1. "If Tezca cripples my host, my strength will be halved, and if he shatters my real body, I'll lose the connection with the severed sky array." The Ring of Space thought as she could barely keep up with the Sun-Eater's attacks. "Either way, the magical formation will fade. If Verhan and his friends step in, we'll have no hope of victory. The severed sky array that was supposed to be my strongest sword is now the shield that keeps me alive." "You guessed it right. I've been crafted a long time ago by a member of the Summoner clan," she actually said. "By your great-great-granddaughter Terja, to be precise." Salanoth had the runes that coded the Davros ring become visible to the naked eye, and Tezca flinched at the vision. Despite the passing of untold millennia, he still remembered every one of the thousands of runes he had passed down to his children. They were part of the bloodline legacy of his family, and unknown to the rest of the Summoner clan, so their presence on the cursed ring's surface corroborated her story. Surprise didn't stay Tezca's hand, nor did it spoil his aim. The Sun-Eater pressed forward even harder than before and unleashed a Tier 3 chaos spell, howling void at Salanoth's. She inwardly cursed the Sun-Eater and hastily tapped into the severed sky formation to conjure a blink that brought her to safety. "Your stubbornness did more than force the Summoner clan into exodus, Tezca the hero. It also brought them to the verge of extinction," she said without ever stopping to move away as the Filgja resumed the chase. "Their enemies exploited your demise and the weakness of the Summoner clan to persecute and harass them. Running away saved them from you, but dozens of Filgjas died every day to keep the clan's secrets and younglings safe from the greed of the awakened council." She had just completed the phrase that Tezca was already upon her. Salanoth managed to block the incoming lunge and the strikes that followed by a hair's breadth, and only by foregoing every chance to counter. The hate of the Summoner clan's members for you grew with each day they spent on the run and each friend, lover, and relative they lost in battle. Yet nobody hated you more than your own family. One of Tezca's tails nailed her host's foot to the ground, and Salanoth cut it off to keep escaping. Your direct descendants were still the clan heads, bearing the responsibility of keeping the clan alive and the weight of your crimes. Even after all you did, the Filgjas trusted your blood, Tezca the Sun-Eater, and didn't blame your offspring for what you did. Yet our people kept dying, and soon all hope was lost. It was then that Terja, the last living member of your family, decided that if survival were impossible, then revenge would have to do. She claimed there was no point in delaying the inevitable, and that if the Summoner clan had to go extinct anyway, it was better to give a purpose to their death through the use of forbidden magic. The elders of the clan agreed with her, and soon what was left of the clan submitted to their judgment out of desperation. The Filgjas stopped running and devoted their lives down to their last second to my creation, sacrificing the captured enemies for their experiments. I, Salanoth, the Ring of Space, am all that's left of the Summoner clan. You can't blame me for my actions, because I was created to hunt you down and kill you. Even with all my power, I can't escape the programming that was forced onto me when Terja completed the forbidden ritual. You can hate me, Tezca the Sun-Eater, but know that killing me is no different than exterminating the Summoner clan with your own hands again. You are the reason our people lost their home. Your vaunted dimensional magic made them targets for all those who coveted the secrets of your legacy. Everything I did is your fault. If there's a shred of Tezca the hero left in you, you should face your retribution with honor and let me kill you." Salanoth held no hope that Tezca would sit there and offer his neck to her. She was just trying to buy her allies enough time to recover from their wounds. She needed their help to kill Tezca and break the last chain that bound the ring of space to her maker. If I fail to kill him now and he escapes, I'll never get another chance like this. Tezca survived and countered the spells that Terja crafted to defeat him, even though he never knew of my existence, and I caught him by surprise. Now that he knows who I am and what I can do, he'll never step inside an enclosed space like this alone, Salinoth thought. If he turns out to be strong enough to defeat us, I can only hope he believes my lies and warps me away out of guilt. I can't run away because of Terja's orders, but if Tezca sends me far enough away, the kill protocol will become inactive again. At that point, Jorl and Orpal can go fuck themselves with a harpoon for all I care. I'll run away somewhere nobody has even heard Tezca's name and stay there until either of us dies. The Ring of Space's story held only a kernel of truth. She had indeed been created by a Filgja called Terja, who was also Tezca's direct descendant, but that was it. Terja had never become the Summoner clan's leader, nor had the clan ever been persecuted like that. After abandoning their ancestral home to escape the newborn Tezca abomination's clutches, the Filgjas had freely bartered their knowledge of dimensional magic in exchange for protection. Then they had moved in secret from one region to another until they had reached the Blood Desert and set sail for Zima. Even diminished, even without Tezca the hero, the Summoner clan was a force to reckon with. Moreover, the rest of the awakened community needed time to study and understand dimensional magic. The Filgjas had carefully left small but relevant details out of their teachings, ensuring that no one could master dimensional magic and become a threat to them before they established a new home for themselves. Terja had been born much later, when the Summoner clan had already occupied one of the most flourishing regions of Zima and had gotten used to the traditions of their new country. She was a genius, self-awakened Filgja, but to those who had known Tezca and received his guidance, she was nothing much. Once Terja had earned herself a seat in the clan council, she had become obsessed with surpassing her ancestors' might and restoring the Summoner clan to the highest seat among the awakened bloodlines. She had the will and the ambition, but lacked the wisdom and talent to achieve her goals. Once Terja reached adulthood, her admiration for Tezca degenerated into bitter envy. After a few decades of relentless practice and no magical breakthrough, envy was joined by resentment, and a couple of centuries later by hatred. Chapter 4350 Prodigal Daughter, Part 2. At first, Terja envied Tezca for succeeding so easily in the subjects in which she kept failing. Then, she resented him for achieving so much in the field of dimensional magic that there was little left she could add to her bloodline legacy. Lastly, being constantly compared to Tezca, and found wanting led Terja to hate his very name. It was at that point that she made proposals that brought the rest of the elders to furrow their brows at first, and then earned her their distrust. Terja lay claims to the contents of Tezca's Omni Pocket, Heaven's Vault. She asked the clan council to allow her to break the vessel of Maugur's first Omni Pocket and give her everything it held. Terja believed that doing so would have provided her with Tezca's secret notes, his unused weapons and treasures. She refused to consider the possibility that her ancestor might have been more talented than she was, and claimed that the only reason for her failures was Tezca keeping the key aspects of his research about dimensional magic to himself. That the Sun Eater had assumed that, upon his death, his heir would imprint Heaven's Vault and be entrusted with a knowledge that Tezca believed too dangerous to fall into the wrong hands. Terja was the most talented member of her family, and she believed herself to be that rightful heir. The elders rejected all her claims, reminding her that Tezca had died of old age and had made no mention of such instructions even on his deathbed. They told Terja that Tezca the hero had spent his final days going over his teachings, ensuring that no aspect of dimensional magic remained unclear. The elders had all bent the knee and bowed their heads in front of the clan members, declaring that if anything of Tezca's knowledge had been lost, it had to be considered their fault. The elders had all bent the knee and bowed their heads in front of the clan members, declaring that if anything of Tezca's knowledge had been lost, it had to be considered their fault. Even Terja's family elder agreed with them, swearing upon his blood that Tezca the hero had hidden nothing from his clan, let alone from his bloodline. The young Filgja took their words as a personal attack and changed tactics. She insisted on breaking Heaven's Vault anyway and studying the artifacts it contained to strengthen the Summoner clan arsenal. Once again the elders denied her, pointing out that without Heaven's Vault, no more pocket dimensions could be crafted. Heaven's Vault was Tezca's opus, the embodiment of his mastery over dimensional magic. Destroying it would mean to lose a precious blueprint, a dimensional magic manual, and the only clues they had to understand infinity magic as Tezca had envisioned it. Moreover, during his final months, Tezca had already taken the most important pieces of his legacy out of Heaven's vault and entrusted them to the members of his clan or family who he deemed the most worthy. The pocket dimension was unlikely to contain more than Tezca's personal equipment, his belongings, and the few treasures from which he couldn't bear parting due to their sentimental value. Even if a few powerful weapons were still left inside Heaven's vault, none of them would exceed endless night, and they weren't worth losing such a priceless treasure of knowledge. After being denied twice, Terja had accepted the Elder's judgment, but only because she had found herself isolated in the clan council, and she couldn't afford to lose the trust of the elders who backed her as new clan head. Decades later, tired of waiting for her moment and of her repeated failures, the not-so-young-anymore Filgja came forward with another proposal. Terja claimed that the Summoner clan's time was running out. Most awakened bloodlines had already mastered the basics of dimensional magic, and soon they would be able to warp, blink, and craft dimensional amulets. When that happened, the Summoner clan would lose the only advantage it had over bigger and stronger Emperor beasts. Terja declared that to ensure the survival of the clan, they needed a second Tezca, someone who could match the former clan leader's prowess and teach the Filgjas the secrets of infinity magic. Since such talent had yet to be born, they could only craft it with forbidden magic. Terja launched herself into a passionate, honest, and completely deranged speech, claiming that Magur owed the Summoner clan that much. All the members of the 6 races had exploited Tezca's return as a mad abomination to extort the secrets of dimensional magic from the Summoner clan. They had taken away the secret of the Filgja's strength, and it was only right that they paid for it. Terja's plan was to forge-master an artificial Tezca with forbidden magic, sacrificing the members of the other races to bridge what the Summoner clan failed to comprehend about Tezca's legacy. It would give the Filgjas an invincible protector, an eternal leader, and a wise mentor. Terja's proposal was unanimously rejected. Her candidacy as clan leader was withdrawn, and she was harshly reprimanded by the entire clan council and her own family. That was the final straw. Seeing how blind and foolish the rest of the Summoner clan was, Terja took it upon herself to work for the greater good, expecting everyone to understand how wrong they had been once they saw the fruits of her labor. She started to work on the project alone in the secrecy of her personal lab, experimenting on the people she kidnapped from the remotest villages she could reach. It didn't take long for the rumors of the sudden disappearances to spread, and the distrust that Terja's previous requests had soon brought everyone's attention to her. Before the clan elders could find anything compromising, she detonated her lab and left on a self-imposed exile. She even left the corpse of a Filgja she had unearthed to make her family think she had died in the explosion. With no one looking for her, with no longer the need to hide from the eyes of the clan, her research progressed at astounding speed, and the number of her victims grew exponentially. Despite what the Summoner clan thought, despite what Terja herself thought, her talent was the real deal. It took her only a few hundred years to complete the forbidden ritual that gave life to Salanoth. Such was her skill and preparations that Terja succeeded in creating a cursed object with the enchantments she had envisioned without losing her life. All that was left was to find a decent host for the Ring of Space and send her traveling Magur in search of her mark. While Salanoth hunted for Tezca, Terja stalked the Summoner clan. Her goal was to imprint Heaven's vault as soon as Salanoth killed Tezca, claiming his equipment and the position of clan leader with it. Terja spent almost 2,500 years waiting for her moment, yet it never came. Salanoth's enchantments were indeed perfect, but her personality had nothing of the blind loyalty and selfless dedication that Terja expected from her. Salanoth had no intention to die just to follow the dreams of a madwoman, so she exploited the loopholes of her programming. Terja's orders were to collect all the possible information about the Sun Eater before confronting and killing him. The all possible information, part, and the lack of a deadline were all Salanoth needed to escape her fate.